Hello and welcome to Rewind Reviews, the podcast where sometimes we look back at the films in our youth and go, "Dear God, what happened?"
Is that what we're doing today, Dan?
Well, we'll find out, I guess, won't we? We are covering Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End, a film that if you listen to our first two reviews, which I do encourage you to go back and check, weird to jump in at the third one. I love you, but strange choice if you've done that. Maybe you just really love or hate World's End and you just really want to hear someone talk about it. But feel free to check out our other two. As we'll set up in that one, I think on the whole, would you say positive about the previous two? On the whole, like I know that there were more. You found more issues with the second one than the first. But I think we both said recommend for both. Is that right?
Yeah. On the whole, definitely recommend for both. Yeah. And even my issues with the third, it's one of those things where I wouldn't say I was fully in love with it, but you twisted my arm on a few things. Like, after hearing some of your thoughts on it, I'm like, actually, yeah, I changed my mind a little bit. So, yeah, I would say so, definitely.
Yeah, so go back, check the other two out. We enjoyed both films. The big question that was looming over was that my memory was despising this third one in cinemas.
And the reason that became a bit of a big question was because your memory of the other two proved to be exactly right. And,
yes.
There was a question mark over the second one because it doesn't have as good a reputation and you remembered loving it.
Right.
Whereas, it played out exactly as you remembered. So, yeah. Dan, you remember hating this one. You saw it in the cinema. You hated it. How do you feel now, Dan?
It's all right, I guess. It's a complicated question, Chris, is that? I think, okay, I didn't hate it, so I don't think it's exactly true to my memory of it, but I know why I hated it, because this film is so fucking broken in so many ways, and it's broken enough that it hurts the good things about it in a noticeable way, whereas I think the flaws and things you can pick out with the second one, for me, are massively outweighed by the good. I really have such fun with that film. I'm willing to overlook the negatives. Because that, like with anything in life, there's always going to be positives and negatives that come from most things that you do. And some things are just so much fun. Like, all right, give a perfect example. We went go-karting, Chris, at your stag do, yes? I had a really good time go-karting, but my arms were killing me afterwards. But the good time way outweighed the arms aching, right? It was. I had a blast. I loved going go-karting. That was really good fun. I was willing to overlook it. So the flaws that you pointed out in the second one, not present, just not a big deal for me. I mean, some of them I disagreed with, but like a lot of them I was just like, yeah, I see that. It just didn't bother me too much. I think that's kind of a lot of where we landed on. With this one, the problems are my arms hurt before I've even sat in the car. And it is actively detracting from the fun. And that is unlike the last two for me. I think that this is bloated, but that's been true of the other two. Bloated in the exact same place as well. Second act.
This is fucking bloated though.
This is more so than those two. Yeah, agreed.
This is bloated in the beginning as well. It's fucking ages before anything happens, and it's half an hour or so before we see Jack. Like this film's bloated everywhere, in my opinion.
Yeah, I don't mind the opening again. It's like similar to the last one. It definitely could be tighter, but I'm okay with it because it's a lot of atmosphere, and I'm okay with Verbinski taking some time to set up the atmosphere and the tone of the world and how it's shifted in the wake of Cutler getting the heart. Right, that like opening scene where they're singing and the hangings, that's all very, very powerful stuff. So I wouldn't lose any of that stuff for the world. But there's so much. Oh, now I'm on your boat and I'm making a deal with you. But actually, it's a betrayal. I'm actually with this guy. Oh, now I'm with this guy. Now I'm swapping over with this guy. Just fucking hell. The middle of this movie is an absolute mess. But the ending is still good. Not as good as the first one. Or the second one, I don't think. I think this is the weakest third act of any of these movies. Because it just is. I just don't think they executed the ideas as well. I think overall, I would say this is a bit of a wet fart of an ending, considering how much I loved the second one and how much I enjoyed the first one. So I can see why young me was angry, because or dubbed this as a bad film and kind of hated it, because the ideas, they're there, but they're not coming through for numerous reasons, I feel. And when I knew it could have been so much better, maybe if they'd just taken some time instead of shitting it out a year after the last one. And I know they filmed them at the same time, but you know what I mean? That squished production cycle, especially when the second one didn't have some of its script pages finished by the time they were shooting. What did they have when they sat down to do this one? Because these two films were filmed, they filmed 2, then they filmed 3. They weren't completely concurrent productions like The Matrix. They one production led straight into the other, but they pretty much did all of the principal photography for 2, then did all the principal photography for 3. The only crossover was there were a couple of sets they knew they were going to need in both. So while they were filming 2, they filmed a couple of scenes for 3. But it wasn't like a big old jumble where they were making essentially one movie and then it split it up in the edit, where they were just filming everything all over the place. They didn't start filming stuff for 3 until they'd pretty much completed 2. So the scripts for this are a big problem. So yeah, not a great overall review. I would say I still kind of recommend it because it wraps up the trilogy, and there are some really good ideas. But if you thought we had to do a bit of digging to make sense of the ideas in the last one, fuck me. Wait till we get to this one. And let me tell you, Chris, the brilliant idea lost in execution in this. Because it's so lost, I don't think I got it the first time I saw it. And on this viewing, I was like, that is so genius. Go on.
Oh, there's a shitload. I think there's a shitload of good stuff in here, Lost.
Yeah.
Like, every scene pretty much feels like exposition. Every line of dialogue feels in some way like it's exposition. And I get creating atmosphere, but at the beginning of this movie, I was like, is this Lord of the Rings? Like, am I watching the right franchise? And I get that, you want to set up... It's a really good interpretation, potentially a generous one, to be like, he wants to set up how the world has changed since, Beckett got hold of Davy Jones's heart at the end of the last one. But, it's not... It doesn't feel like Pirates. There's like one set piece. We've complimented the set piece and the visuals so much. There's like one big set piece in this movie. There's one... There's hardly any jokes, and also not only does it not feel like a Pirates movie for the majority of it, it's also not the movie they set up at the end. Like, they'll do anything for Jack, so they'll literally cross worlds and go to the end and do all of this stuff. They get there fairly quickly. They by the time this movie rolls around, they're getting Jack because he's got one of the 9 pieces of 8 or whatever it's called, not because they miss him. There's even a fucking I watched the trailer after watching this movie, Dan. The trailer starts with the end of the second film, where it's like, would you do anything to get Jack back? He was a great man, we miss him. And ends with the joke of, did anyone rescue me because they like me? Like, they contradict those ideas. Like, yeah. I don't think it's not what you set up. Like,
yeah,
it's weird. And it's watching them so close together has made it even more apparent how much of a fucking turn this movie takes.
Yeah, and I'm not against a shift in tone. I don't think this needs to feel like the last movie at all. I don't think that's a requirement, But it would be nice. It would be nice if it had at least kept the consistency of like the character decisions and that sort of stuff, because that's the bigger problem, isn't it? It's would you sail to the end of the earth for Jack? Absolutely. Does anyone give a shit about me, or do you all just come here because you've got your own ulterior motives?
Yeah, and
that is a way bigger problem than a tonal shift, because I don't think a tonal shift is necessarily a bad thing if everything else is consistent. If the characters were consistent, I don't think you'd care that this movie had a different feel from the last one. Does that make sense?
The characters are, because Elizabeth and Will are another example. Elizabeth and Will are a grand love story just because they think the audience are invested in them as a love story, even though they did a lot to show differences between them in the second movie, and don't really have them sort of interacting much in this, other than to acknowledge that they've got problems and then get married.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because this movie has that scene where he says something about like, her making decisions for herself and on her own or something like that. And then that's a whole, there you go. If you make your choices alone, how can I trust you? Is what Will says to Elizabeth, to which she replies, you can't. And I like that line, right? I do like that line. It's a great way to describe how piracy corrupts someone, right? He can't trust Elizabeth anymore because she's fallen into this world in a way that he hasn't, He's a bit swashbuckling, sure, but he's just out to do the right thing, right? He's always been out just to do the right thing, where you get the impression as these movies go on, Elizabeth's enjoying this, right? She's getting quite into the lifestyle, the vibes, and her choice to betray Jack at the end of the last movie leans into that idea too, right? It's infectious. She's one of them now, like Jack, like Barbossa, like all these guys, just constantly turning on everyone, all of that stuff, and that's great.
Were it not for them, and I don't want to derail us into another subject, maybe we'll loop back to this, but were it not for them completely not doing anything with the Pirate King stuff, if they made more of that, and it actually affected her ending at the very end, other than a big speech, I think Elizabeth would have one of the most complete arc across the 3 films,
right?
And probably the best arc across the 3 films.
Well, I think she still does have the best arc across the 3 films. It's just got a weird bump at the very end. But yeah, I agree with you. I 100% agree with you. But I mean, you've got that line that sets up the differences between them, as you pointed out. Which is that she's fallen into this world and he's not, and you just think like, well, how are we going to handle that? How are we going to deal with that? Well, we're not. They're just going to be in love at the end. Because the movie says they need to be, because we need an ending like that. It's just these sort of choices that you just feel like this script gets 2 or 3 more drafts. You smooth that right out.
It's also I agree with you that the character stuff is the most important, but it is also the iconography. Davy Jones versus Jack at the end on the top of the ship. Mm-hmm. Name me another sword fight in the movie, Dan. Do you know what I mean? Like and I'm sorry, that's part of the from the very beginning in the old blacksmith's office. But sword fights are a part of these movies, and it's just like I say, the set pieces. There's nothing to match the wheel in Dead Man's Chest, and that's not the end of the movie. That's that's the midway point. In the midway point in this movie. I'll find it if you want, but I'm willing to bet the exact midway point in this movie, probably some people stood around talking about some exposition.
Yeah, but I will say, I think the wheel is further in than the midpoint of the second one. I think it's like 2/3. But yeah, I agree. I agree with your point wholeheartedly. But yeah, so what the usual structure, or the structure they've had with these movies previously, is like opening act has one big escape / set piece. Then the second act is where all of the drawn-out exposition characters talking usually ends up, and we always bemoan that hurts the pacing. And then right at the end of the second act, heading into the third, there's a big sort of more comedic set piece, like the wheel, that then leads into the actual dramatic end set piece, like Jack and the Kraken, right? Or, Jack and Barbossa in the first one. And I think that mostly works as a structure. And I'm not saying all these movies need to have the exact same structure, but you're right. The if we're talking about like iconic set pieces and thingy, there's a lot of fighting happening on this, but it feels a little bit Deathly Hallows. It's just like fighting's happening, but there's no sense of who's fighting who for what reason. It's also borrowed Deathly Hallows color palette. That's a different issue.
I think it's worse than Deathly Hallows though, because at least in Deathly Hallows, there's the promise of all these people coming together to fight, and they come together and fight. Whereas in this movie, we have like 9 pieces of 8, so 9. 8 because 2 of them come from the same group. We have 8 groups going to pirate war, and then just like 3 ships fighting each other. At least in Deathly Hallows, it lives up to that at the end.
But in a way, I mean, so it lives up to it in the sense of it happens, but it is done in the least interesting, most boring, most I want to scratch my eyes out way, because what I'm really more referring to is not from a story perspective. Yeah, so the story of Harry Potter, having all those people come together, that is the right ending. It's what it's building up to, and it's delivering on that. But the actual execution of the action is the flattest, most boring, drab, deeply unexciting nonsense you can get. And in this Pirates movie, the Barbossa Jack fight is incredible, but it's not enough to account for what's happening around them. It's just lots of random shots of people hitting each other with swords.
Davy Jones and Jack.
Sorry, I said Barbossa. Apologies. Yeah, sorry. Davy Jones and Jack fighting on the mast is iconic, and we talked about this last week. I said, there's something I do really distinctly remember from World's End, and it is that image of the two ships going round the whirlpool with the masts connecting, and those two fighting on the masts while the ships go around the whirlpool. That is an iconic image and an incredible one, and one I'm very glad is in the movie. And there is some other iconic imagery earlier in the movie, but we'll come back to that because that's about something different. But in terms of action, that's the only really iconic action moment in the whole movie, because the rest of what's happening in the movie is just generic. You're on one side, I'm on another. We're just going to hit each other with swords and clash swords, which is not exciting. It's just not exciting. It doesn't work. And the stuff on the boat, on the base of the boat, only gets exciting once Jack and Davy Jones come down in amongst it, because they are where the stakes are. That's where the heart is. That's where the key is. That's where, and they drop all that stuff slowly into the fight below, and the fight below becomes more interesting because there is suddenly actually something to be fucking fighting for below, other than just I'm one team, you're the other. So yeah, it's shockingly pulled together considering the quality of the previous two movies, and I think we can squarely point the error at the choice to film these two back to back and not take more time on the script for the third one. It's just so much clearer that there's less attention been paid to it. So much clearer. Like, it's just a mess. And, strands of ideas all over the place, nothing being pulled together. It's very frustrating. So I think if we're just doing the overall stuff before we get into the nitty gritty, for me, I want to say, if you watch the other two, I guess I do kind of have to recommend this, because I think if you've watched the first two, you do need to, this is your closure. But it's not great. I think because I recommend the first two so heartily, I kind of have to recommend this one as if you're going to do the first two, you can need this. But it's not a good film, I don't think. I think it's a complicated question to answer. There are bits of it I like, and things in it we'll get to. There's plenty that I enjoyed. We will talk about, but as a whole, no.
I do agree with you, and that is where I ultimately land, because I'm a completionist. But fucking hell, it's 2 hours 50 minutes. Like, do you know what I mean? It's nearly 3 hours.
Yeah, if you strip like Marvel and Touchstone out of Disney's back catalogue, this is the longest Disney movie of all time, even to this day.
It's crazy. It's not. I don't think it's a good movie, but I am a completionist, and I was impressed by how. And I said this on the last podcast, and I maintain it. I do think this is way more of a trilogy than I remember. I really dislike, especially when the production of sequels are close together, I really dislike something feeling like a part one and two part twos. This isn't. This is three distinct films, like without a doubt. This is, so.
Chris only believes that as long as we're referring to non-Marvel movies, of course, just to clarify. Because Chris loves him. Chris loves him some Infinity War and Endgame, which were shot as one movie, really, in many ways.
Yeah, fair point. Yeah, no, fair point. But yeah, no.
I'm just saying there are exceptions because we've both complimented those two movies. So
those movies.
I was audience surrogate there because obviously I could hear them thinking the same thing out loud.
No. I think there's an argument that if they're part of a wider franchise, which makes it a bit different. But yeah, no, it's absolutely fair. They were shot together, and I do think they're works of art.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's break some of the nitty gritty. Now let's talk about some of the broad character stuff, because the thing that
do you want to?
Oh, go on.
I don't know if we get out of the way or we bring it up when it comes up. Do you want to hear my distinct? But we're gonna go to some weird places with this. But I feel like I've mentioned it a lot. That I had a memory connected to the third film.
Oh, I forgot all about this. Yes, because obviously once we do when we do trilogies, by the third one we don't really talk about our history with the franchise because we've kind of covered it. Sorry, yes, please, yeah.
I'll tell you now. this is not the fun romp story you think it's gonna be. Like, I'll tell you now. It's about to get real, and I apologise, but we do, we review these things honestly, and we always talk honestly about our memories and connections with these films, and this happened
because the context of this podcast is reviewing the movie in the context of our feelings of it when we saw it originally. That is what this podcast is. That is the premise of this podcast in many ways.
And there is an interesting thing connected to that with this. I do think whilst it's hard to talk about and might be quite weird and might go down a route we've never gone down before. I do think it is interesting. Dan, if you know Brett Goldstein's podcast and the questions on that, films to be buried with, and it's a series of questions.
Yes.
If you were to ask me on that podcast, what would I say is the scariest film I've ever seen? I would say Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. And this is why. I went to the cinema to see this film with my then girlfriend and her mum and stepdad. Love them to bits. Oh God, so much affection for those three people. Really just happy, like real proper. I mean, this isn't relevant to the story at all, but I just a chance to have 2 seconds of affection for them. A real high school sweetheart relationship. Do you know what I mean? Broke up because we were going to uni and we weren't going to last forever, but wonderful. Couldn't have asked for a better first love. Amazing. So we all go and see this movie together, and we're watching the movie. And in the scene where Beckett, spoilers from this point out, in the scene where Beckett dies, I had the most profound realization that in that moment that everyone died, and it felt like I had what I recognise now as a panic attack. It felt like the walls were closing in on me. It felt like I completely lost my breath, going, oh shit! Like I knew about death, I'd thought about death, but something about that moment made me go, fucking hell! Like dead is dead. Like shit. I had a real, like I say, I look back and I go, I think it's a panic attack, and it really, I've never rewatched the films. When you suggested doing them, I was like, fucking hell, I'm going to have to face that scene. A few years ago, I'd started to play that scene on YouTube and turned it off and been like, nah. So I knew I'd have to face that scene going into this. And my memory of that scene, like I say, I had it just, completely lost my breath, completely went, had a panic attack, and it's strange because my memory of that scene changed and reframed in my mind because of it. That fire encompassing him felt so fucking epic in my memory because when I watched it, it felt like that fire in that moment was encompassing me. Do you know what I mean? I had a real physical.
That's like a visceral reaction to the movie.
Visual reaction to that scene.
Visceral, I meant. Sorry, I don't know why I said it, but visceral.
And an emotive and physical and all those things reaction to that scene in that moment. I remember it so vividly, and I remember my memory of that scene, which when I watched it back, it was so odd for me because it wasn't my memory. One, here's a strange one for you. In my memory, it wasn't Beckett. In my memory, it was Norrington. That was Norrington's death. So let me tell you, when Norrington just sort of gets shot offhandedly at the beginning of this movie, I was like, huh. What? That's odd. And I don't know if because I I know this sounds dumb, but I really like coupling. I really like Jack Davenport as an actor, and I don't know if mentally my memory made it him because of how much it affected me so oddly on some level. Well, it must have been that character and that actor.
I think it's more. I think it's more likely that Beckett's not as memorable a character. So when you were thinking about it again years later, you connected the guy in the wig and the hat to the other guy.
Yeah, and I think
that's more likely.
I
but
do.
Yeah, I see your point though for sure.
And I remember being fairly confused watching it the first time as well about what the fuck was going on. So for all I knew, at that point, I thought that was, do you know what I mean? I was confused about which character was which anyway. But yeah, man, that moment fucking it scared the shit out of me and gave me a pat. Yeah, it was bad. Like, and it was, and I have thought about that moment since, and it gave me a it sort of changed the way and I don't think that moment, I don't think anything about the film necessarily, but that moment of my life changed, I think, the way I sort of viewed and thought about death, which has obviously developed since. You know, I was a young teenager at this point. But like, yeah, I have always remembered that, and it was so strange watching it back, because when I'm watching it back, more I guess understanding, and you know, a combination of things, like prepared for it. It was, you know, this whole trilogy was about me. I was like, I said to Jess, like, I was like, we're doing Pirates of the Caribbean, and she was like, right, and I was like, I kind of had a moment to do with that film, which I've never really talked about with anyone. She was like, right, and I told her, and you know, she could see how it made it, how it relaying it, you know, she, you know, gave me a hug, and like, you know, she could see what relaying it even did, and like, but watching it, because, and I'm not trying to be, this isn't me trying to be fucking tough or anything. If I was doing that, I just wouldn't have fucking talked about this anyway. But genuinely rewatching it, because like the Beckett character is so, like, the moment doesn't mean anything to the character. He's so forgettable by that point. It's not even particularly epic. This is arguably the big bad, the character who has tried to be positioned throughout the last two movies as the big bad of this trilogy, and it's so like, you know, the characters can't even be sure they've killed him. It's just sort of nameless and faceless gunfire, like destroying a ship, and it isn't as sort of, it isn't what it was in my memory, because my memory framed the film how I reacted emotionally and physically to the film, and my memory of that scene was affected by my own personal reaction to it. And it was just, yeah, it was quite bizarre to not have that reaction again, because I was more going, this feels a bit anticlimactic, and like they've not really done the right, you know, they've almost not done right by this character. Like I was so much more aware of what that moment was as a moment of the film. I guess I was watching it, you know, that moment, in rewatching it, that moment for me was about Beckett's death in the third Pirates of the Caribbean movie. It was not about a realization to do with death, or feelings to do with death, or whatever. I don't know if realization is the right word, but you know, a reaction about my feelings towards death. It wasn't that when I watched it, so you'd be pleased to know I had an easier time watching it because, you know, it wasn't that for me this time. But yeah, it was so interesting watching it, going, oh, my memory has altered this moment, like, and I've never gone back, and like, how interesting. So yeah, that's a strange sort of detour, but it is honest.
Yeah, no, I think that's really fascinating, and I think, like, obviously, you know, little Chris needs a hug and a high five, you know, after a moment like that, because obviously, you know, these things, they hit us when they hit us. You know, it's and it's never going to happen at an ideal time. It's always going to happen at a weird, awkward one, and that's just the way these things go, isn't it? And it's, you know, whether it was unrelated really to the scene and more just watching a man die in such a focused way, because it's a several minute, it's a multiple minute long scene. They give his death a lot of focus. You know, the ship slowly blows apart, you know, around him as he's, you know, he's first of all this death and destruction is happening around him, and he's just watching it happen. And all credit to the actor. I forget the gentleman's name again, but
Tom Hollander.
Tom Holland, that's it. Because the look in his eyes, it's incredible. Like, I just rewatched it as you were speaking, or I had it on in silent, you know, the visuals while you were talking, and looking at it again with his you know, performance leading the way, because I had the sound turned off. It's really, really incredible. And I actually put in my notes, this is one of my favorite scenes in this entire movie. And I do actually disagree that it's kind of a meaningless death. Of a guy that they kind of positioned to be the main villain. I don't think he was ever the main villain. I don't think they ever tried to make him the main villain.
Yeah, that and a lot of that could be my my weirdness of it wasn't the moment, it wasn't my recollection kind of thing. That could be all to do with that for sure.
But what I think is really fascinating about it is it's so I'm sorry, we're coming back to me. Well, how did we phrase it last week when I was complimenting Gorbavinsky? What was the phrasing you made me use? It was like,
Dan's newfound hard-on for...
My newfound hard-on for Gore Verbinski, yes. Because when I was watching it this time, and that moment was happening, and I saw the power of the performance combined with this incredible choice of visuals, and this choice to have this character so resolute in his fate, all this destruction and screaming and cowering around him, the most unnecessary bombardment of that ship, just cannons flying everywhere, the ship literally disintegrating around him, and he's casually taking steps down steps that are disintegrating behind him as he steps off each step, and it's ridiculous. It's entirely ridiculous. The ship is being destroyed from one end to the other for some reason instead of all at once, which doesn't make any sense, but it doesn't matter. It literally doesn't matter. Physics don't matter in that moment. It is... He goes down the steps slowly with his hand on the banister, and as his hand slides on the banister disintegrates just an inch behind where his hand is, and when he gets to the bottom, all of this wood flying everywhere, he's engulfed in flames, and the last thing he does before that flames is he looks directly into the camera. What an interesting choice that is. And I thought,
I just rewatched it, and yay for me for being able to rewatch it again. But
save it for your therapist, Chris. I'm kidding.
I'm kidding. the widening of his eyes as he looks into the camera is terrifying. Like watching it back just then, I can see why it shut me up.
Yeah, I think watching a man who's alive but knows he isn't long for this world accept it in such an interesting and unusual and not stereotypically filmed way feels realer than all of the other deaths happening around him. Because every death in the movie is an I'm falling off a thing, but his death is so unusual. There's something weirdly human about this sort of badger in headlights thing that they've done with him.
It's that resoluteness combined with that final eye widening as he looks in the camera and the flames engulf him is scary. Like that is a fucking real human choice reflected on the screen there.
Yeah. And now I don't know, I wasn't on set, but I'm telling you now that I will be willing to put a huge amount of money on Verbinski being a part of that choice. Because what I've learned from this is he's very good at helping actors make unusual choices and allowing them to have that creative freedom, and allowing them. So I'm not saying the idea necessarily came from him, but he will have encouraged it. He will have grown it. He will have, adjusted his shots to play along with it, or maybe even he did have the idea initially anyway. Maybe he came to Tom Holland and said, "I've got this thing. I want to maybe think about doing it this way." But for me, what's really interesting about it is that character has such an interesting sort of place in this, in that he, again, like many of the characters in the Pirates trilogy, isn't really a villain, in that he is more an antagonist. He is an obstacle. His goal is rid world of piracy, right? His goal is order. His goal is, and he's going about it any which way, right? You might not agree with his methods, but he is a clear and very understandable and very achievable goal. He is not a villain. He's not just out for murder because twirly mustache murderous villain guy. He's got moral. He's got his own morality, his own world view, his own political perspective, and he's acting in what he thinks is his and the society's best interests. He's not a character that has a big epic sword fight with Jack Sparrow on the top of a bow, or Will, or Elizabeth. He's not a character that has a big fight with Norrington at the end for captaincy of the East India Trading Company, whatever they're called, and with this joint venture they've got with the British Navy. he is just another political pawn trying to do the thing, and it's a trope in pirate stuff that there's always sort of like a government trying to stamp down on the pirates and what have you. And I think it's a really interesting choice to show that after all he'd done, have him meeting such a dramatic end when Davy Jones, who is arguably closest that this franchise gets, in these three at least, to a villain. Because even Barbossa in the first one we talked about, he was just a guy that was cursed that wanted to undo the curse. Any means necessary, right? He antagonist, absolutely. His goals differed from our heroes, 100%, but not a villain. Whereas, Davy Jones, he'd abandoned his duty. The world was going to shit as a result. He was being selfish and greedy, and he was the closest this franchise got to a villain. His death, surprisingly, simple and not overstated. You know what I mean? It's a really quick, brief, glancing moment. Again, maybe an eyes widen of a sort, and then he's off the side of the ship and he's gone, and that's it. He's eaten by the sea, and it's like it's no emphasis put on that really at all. And I really, really weirdly love that choice to give Beckett such an over the top ending while he's giving such a subtle performance. There's something very powerful about it, and I can't even really put my finger on it about that choice. But it is just this idea of the sheer destruction his ship goes through is so much so that the entire fleet turn around. There's such a necessary violence aimed at him makes everyone else go home. Yeah, I don't know. I found it a really interesting choice to give such an epic ending to such a sort of minor player in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah. It's under as young me is a testament to. It's undeniably powerful.
Yeah, I think so. And I think that's kind of why it ended up being one of my favorite scenes in the whole film. I just thought the artistry on display. And look, yeah, all right. From a special effects perspective, some of the bits of the ship breaking up look a bit ridiculous because it's just so much debris and it looks like particle effects. I get that, but mostly it really holds up.
But that's not. I don't think that's an issue. I don't think that's an issue with the effects themselves. That's an issue conceptually.
Yes,
as you said, it's just ridiculous the way in which the ship is breaking up. Yeah. But the effects themselves within that are very good.
Right. And his defeat is it's the big signifier that this current war on piracy is, at least for the time being, going away. And I don't know. He kind of accidentally ended up. His arrogance got him killed in the end, and I think I always love a good arrogant villain sort of gets himself into a situation where he gets murdered, and the idea that he's murdered by the very ship that he tried to control. Along with the Black Pearl, but the Flying Dutchman is a big part of it. I don't know. I really like it. I think it's a great ending for Beckett, and a really good button on the movie because it's by that point the mystical side of it and the Davy Jones of it is resolved. So the remaining plot thread is just the East India Trade Company and the British Navy, the English Navy. I'm not sure which. Yeah, I guess it's the British. Their team up, their whole shtick against piracy sort of put to an end. And also there was he did, even though he wasn't a villain, he had in his quest to resolve piracy, he had enacted a huge amount of cruelty onto others. And the movie opens with him hanging a child, with his regime getting a child hung, pirate or not. That's absolutely brutal.
Oh, such a bleak and powerful opening to the movie.
Yeah, and when you combine those two things, it's such a fitting death. And also, he got Elizabeth's. The only thing I do kind of wish is that Elizabeth's ship, the ship she ends up inheriting, was a part of that, because I feel like this guy got her dad killed. I know I think does she get to yell fire? Maybe, I'm not sure, but I do a little bit wish Elizabeth had been more involved in that. But otherwise, it's great. I've rambled for a long time about the scene. I love that scene. So yeah, sorry.
Well, quick side note. Let me get the. It's Pike. What's the name of the actor who plays Elizabeth's dad?
It is. Wait. I have the. Jonathan Pryce.
Jonathan, in the scene where he is floating in the boat to the land of the dead. Jonathan Pryce's acting in that scene, you could make an argument that's potentially some of the best acting across the whole series. He is so fucking brilliant in that scene. Like, so emotive, just really sells that he's not quite with it, and he's shocked by his death, but he's accepted his death. Like, he's so good in that scene, and I think he helps, like, kind of helps sell the sort of the will of it all at the end, and they don't go into it in nearly enough detail, and I don't think it will. Oh no, Will does witness that, but you know that if they, it's one of the only things that helps back up Will's choice at the end of the movie, you know, in a way.
Well, we'll have to talk about that because I'm not sure that is Will's choice.
Well, no, yeah, that's true. He gets. Yeah, it's just of the two options he's given, you know, turn into a big old fish man or
yeah, but even then, it's Jack that does it for him, which I think.
No, I mean, yes. Once that's happened, those are his only two choices.
Yeah.
But can I for a bit to juxtapose slightly the weird hole that I took us in, Dan? Can I talk about another scene which I have and continue to have a reaction to that it could also be linked to Films to Be Buried With?
Oh, please.
I don't think, Dan, on this podcast specifically, we celebrate enough, and maybe it's just not that present in the films that we've done, but Films to Be Buried With does a great job of celebrating, you know, sexy movies and the sexy scenes, you know, and there's some stuff at the beginning of this movie that I think is not good in terms of, like, you know, the scene where he's making Elizabeth Swann strip and she's got her weapons hidden and they're like, oh my god, where could she have been hiding these weapons? Like, it's not very funny and it's a bit derogatory. I
actually really like that scene because I think it's doing the opposite of that. I think the point is that's the world she's in. And
yes, because I did feel that, yeah. And she's adapted to it, and also it is kind of like, you know, it's weird that in a way the movie, that's such a big part of pirate life. That's sort of like you know, the fact that they've not done that, you know, the fact that that's kind of the first pervy pirate we've had in these three movies is crazy. And we've talked before about, you know, sometimes a movie is not saying something's right; it's just saying it happens in the world. But Dan.
Yes.
In the spirit of celebrating sexiness, right? Which I don't think we do enough on this podcast, Dan. I'm going to tell you now. I think that last scene where he says, I'm going to need my other boot back, and then she's wearing the boot, and he takes it off, and he kisses her leg, maybe one of the sexiest scenes I've ever seen in a film.
Sure.
I'm not even joking. I think it is pure erotica. But I think there's like, we'll talk about the ending, but you know, the lust and longing, the tearing away, the shot of Keira Knightley's leg. Like, I'm a leg man. I mean, I'm not going to deny that helps, but I just, you know, in almost the polar opposite reaction, you know, young me could have. I think, you know, I've always equally remembered that scene and always been like, that's a sexy scene, man. I think that's a really, yeah. I'm just saying. I wanted to take a moment. I don't think we call it out enough on this podcast, Dan. I think we're afraid to celebrate sexy, and let me tell you, I think that scene is sexy with a capital S. What are your thoughts?
Do I charge you by the hour for this session, or do we just do like a whole fee? You know, like a set fee, and it just goes on how long it goes on. No. I think, yeah, if you're a leg man, that makes perfect sense. And I'm with you. We should celebrate sexy scenes in movies. I just don't think we've really. I think you nailed it when you said I don't think we've really covered. We watch a lot of family movies. There aren't a lot of sexy scenes.
Yeah.
And then the ones that are kind of leaning comedy, like you know, like the stuff in Indiana Jones that's like to do with, like, you know, that, you know, that's sort of like about him getting laid and being taken. It's all joke based, like when his dad and he slept with the same woman, like or the scene in the first movie where he's like trying he thinks she wants to sleep with him, she thinks he wants to sleep with her, and neither of them end up sleeping together. Like that's the closest I can think of. What else have we got?
Well, the girl next door, but none of those scenes were good. Like,
right?
I think the thing that makes this so sexy is it's charged by. There's some sexy shots in it.
Other than Heath Ledger, anything in 10 Things I Hate About You?
I think this scene is it's really charged. It's so sexy because it's charged by characters in a way. Do you know what I mean? It's not just sexy shots. It's also there's character meaning behind it. And yeah, I just thought
I'm with you, but I'm stuck on this idea of like, is there a reason that's not couple, or is it just the movies we watched? I'm looking back, I think it's just the movies we've watched. These aren't particularly movies that have like sexy scenes.
Well, there's the I can't remember. I think we landed on it just a bit long. That's the really long Zion dance sex scene in Matrix Reloaded, isn't there?
Oh, the orgy scene. Yeah, but we talked about it. We didn't ignore it.
We did talk about it. I think we talked about Leia as well in our gold bikini.
Sure. Sure.
Right.
Yeah. That's a big one for a lot of people. I think as a non-leg guy, I don't really. I'll fully admit to just not really understanding the leg thing, and genuinely, other than just being slender, I don't really understand the difference between a sexy leg and a not sexy leg. I'm the same with feet. People go, "Oh, she's got nice feet," and I'm just. Well, I say, as if loads of people say that. But, online, there's like foot fetish is like a big thing, and I always just feet. I don't know the difference between good and bad feet because I'm not. It just doesn't do it for me.
So yeah, well, I'll answer that for you, Dan. If I ever come across a leg that I don't think is a sexy leg, but at the moment, I can't answer. I can't help.
Can I just say my fee just went up for this session? No, I'm with you. I get it. No, you're not wrong to point it out, and I'm glad you did. I didn't particularly find it, but I enjoyed knowing that they got their day together. That made me very happy. I was like, good on them both.
And that again,
because let me tell you, that is two very beautiful people having a good time. And I'm always on board with that. I mean, even Christ, the bit when his ship comes up at the end in the post credits, and you see him all handsome and on the edge, all looking all rugged. I'm like, absolutely, Orlando Bloom for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And it kind of, obviously, I don't want to spoil your choice. It's such a shame, isn't it? Like, well, I guess we'll talk about it when we get to your choice. But I'm like, because obviously knowing that the fifth one is about, their son, it kind of makes you go, it's such a shame that Stranger Tides exists, doesn't it? Because it's like, yeah, but in order to get there, which I'm intrigued by. We'll have to fucking sit through 4. But
to be fair though, it's actually, I think I've been looking at it, and I'm kind of 10 years, right, between Will vanishing here and being able to reappear. Yeah, this came out in 2007. Have a guess when the fifth one came out.
2019.
2017, Chris. The exact time in which it would have been. 10 years.
Oh, right.
So
they flash forward again, don't they, I believe?
And the one in between deals with the other hint of a thing that we're going to get to in this movie, which is the Fountain of Youth.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So I actually think, right, and I only saw On Stranger Tides and did not like it. And I haven't seen the fifth one, which I always forget the title of as well. What's the fifth one called? Do you recall off the top of your head?
Well, it really confused me because, and I had to end up looking this up. Depending on your territory, either Salazar's Revenge or something.
Salazar's Revenge.
Salazar's Revenge or Dead Men Tell No Tales.
Well, I'll just go with the American, whatever America had, because. I hate when they do a shit title for other countries. I mean, let's say Salazar. Oh, look at this! Yeah, Pirates of the Caribbean, Dead Men Tell No Tales. What's it for us on Disney Plus when we look it up in this country?
So Salazar's Revenge.
So Salazar's Revenge is clearly like the. So then, what's the? Okay, let's find out. If Dead Men Tell No Tales is the. Okay. So Dead Men Tell No Tales is its title in the States. It was Salazar's Revenge in international territories. So we'll go with Dead Men Tell No Tales. Yeah, because I think that's a better title anyway.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah, for sure. So are you saying it now? Are you going to just leave us hanging? Are you picking Stranger Tides?
I'll be honest with you, Chris. Until today, I absolutely wasn't, and now I'm a little unsure. So I came into this less convinced that's the way that I wasn't going to do it because I really was like, no, we don't need to do it. Let's not put ourselves through it. But I am after having now watched this one, I am a little tempted. But we'll come back to that. Yeah, I've got some time to think. Yeah. I've still got roughly an hour to have a think about that.
So you know, a real mix of emotions on two scenes from me there. Let's have you talk for a while or choose some topics.
I wanted to talk about the scene you referenced before we moved on to the you know, you never skip leg day. That's what I'm going to refer to it now. Whenever we have a section where where Chris talks about legs, we're going to call it "Don't Skip Leg Day." It's the name of that segment. I've decided. The scene where she's sort of asked to she has to stretch. I actually, and this could be me just being charitable in the reading, right? Because this could just be Leary movie is Leary. Now we haven't really talked about this, but Keira Knightley has gone extensively on record of talking about the first movie particularly, and how she was forced to wear particular outfits that reveal a certain amount of her chest, and then a huge amount of makeup applied to create an impression of cleavage that she said is absolutely not there, as well as like padding and all this stuff, and that she felt very uncomfortable with all of that. I'm relieved to say that basically, as the movies have gone on and her character has evolved, the outfits were less, you know, delicate lady likely to be a damsel in distress in a dress to, you know, one of the boys, so to speak, you know. And I think that's a really the charitable view on the scene in this movie is the final way of them expressing that journey, right? In that she goes in looking to be one of the boys, one of the pirates, and she's still to some degree not accepted, and they find an excuse to make her strip. But in actuality, she really did have 1,000 guns because she is genuinely one of the boys, right? And actually, to be fair as well to the movie, even though they play that as the joke, at no point is she underdressed to the degree that she was in the first movie.
No,
they give her a big baggy shirt. She, you know, it's not like they strip her down to her underwear or anything like that. And because of that choice, I'm inclined to believe that the intentions of that scene were good.
Well, Jeffrey Rush and Keira Knightley's performance in it is also very funny. The way Jeffrey Rush leans back,
yes,
it's a great moment. Go, where'd that come from?
Yeah, it's incredible, and I love that final that big gun comes back in the final act of the movie as well, which I love.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a great moment. So I just want to say I enjoyed that scene. I thought it was a fun scene. I like that idea a lot, and I think it's another scene that does a lot for her character. I think, you know, because it shows us that even though she's made that journey, she's not 100% just accepted as one of the boys, one of the pirates. Now, you know, it's clearly a very misogynistic world still. And I know that there are always looming questions over Gore Verbinski in terms of his, you know, leanings, because particularly, and we didn't really cover this last movie, and we probably should have, his treatment of the notion of like indigenous populations. He is depicted them there as like savages and like, you know, cannibals and all that stuff. And there's a part of me that just goes, sure, but nothing in the movie says he thinks that all tribes are like that. They've come across a cannibalistic tribe that have this belief system. It doesn't. The movie's not a thesis on how. The movie's not making a statement on how all tribal people across history have behaved. You know what I mean? Any more than Captain Jack is representative of every single pirate that's ever existed. Do you know what I mean? if there were multiple tribes across all these movies and they all acted like that, I would understand. But I personally, I don't particularly see it. Now, I don't know if there's more of that sort of stuff in his other work to maybe lean towards it. There's some sort of undertone of stereotyping or racism in the work. Maybe there is. I've strictly speaking, how many Gore Verbinski movies have I actually seen? Not many. is the answer. In fact, I could check. How many do you think I've seen? Because I'm not even sure. So I've seen these three.
I think I've only seen these. I haven't seen Lone Ranger. I haven't seen...
Oh, I've seen Lone Ranger. Oh, Rango. I've seen Rango. I liked Rango. So that's what? So that's 3, 4, 5. And The Ring, 6. Mouse Hunt, 7. Yeah. You've seen... Yeah, we did Mouse Hunt on this podcast. You chose it. Yeah, we've done... You've seen Mouse Hunt.
Oh, yeah. So I've seen Mouse Hunt. Yeah. So before, yeah.
Yeah. So Mouse Hunt, the 3 Pirates of the Caribbean movies, The Ring, and Rango, and Lone Ranger I've seen. So actually, I've seen a fair amount, to be fair. I've not seen Cure for Wellness, and I've not seen The Weatherman, and I've not seen The Mexican. Or The Ritual. But there you go. Oh, no, The Rituals are short. Okay, fine. Yeah. He directed the Budweiser Frogs advert. Wow.
I've seen them.
Isn't that strange? Okay, so younger people won't remember this, but there was a very famous advert when I was growing up, and it was 3 frogs going, Bud, Y, Zer, is their croaks. And Gore Verbinski apparently directed it, so there you go.
I do like your newfound hard-on for him. Like, there is, even in this film where, and to be fair, there's no will or anything, but he's also very deliberately not going with that for that. Now, do I like the choice of that? No, but the editing, the composition of that opening with the hanging,
I loved it.
Beautiful. Beckett's death, beautiful. The fucking, we've not even really talked about the set piece, the whirlpool. Beautiful. Yep. Davy Jones still looks amazing.
Well, like the bigger one is the ship in the locker, and how they make it go underwater, and then the up is down and down is up, and that whole thing. Because let me tell you, that's fucking incredible to look at.
Yeah, like so. Regardless of how you may feel about, how long it is, and whether that shift in tone works for you or not. It's still a fucking beautiful movie.
Yeah, and look, and I think a lot of the stuff that I think doesn't work are script choices. I think 9 out of 10 of the things you're going to point out that you didn't like about this movie are going to come down to the script. I really do believe that.
Yep, I'd agree with that. Yep,
and that's why I this hasn't really dampened my newfound appreciation for Gore Verbinski as a director. I'm really excited actually because the guy that did the video that came out recently I talked about, Just Right. He did a video on the Pirates trilogy, which I've yet to watch because I really wanted to form my own opinions on rewatch before watching his video. Also, my memory of these films was quite faint for the third one, I should say, and I didn't want to see scenes before I saw them in context, if that makes sense, because I don't remember them. But I'm excited to watch that now. He's also done a second video on his Nebula channel called What Happened to Gore Verbinski, which I'm very curious to watch, to see and learn more about his work, and why he hasn't made a movie since 2016. I suspect just The Lone Ranger being the absolute flop that it was is probably the answer. But I didn't care for The Lone Ranger. I remember seeing it at the time and not being impressed at all. I didn't see it in cinema either. I waited till it was until it was on like DVD or like, streaming, and I think even then I probably just illegally downloaded it. I'm not sure, but I think that's a really good chance. Although, is The Lone Ranger the most cancelled movie in history? We got Armie Hammer being cancelled for being Armie Hammer. We got Johnny Depp cancelled for being Johnny Depp. But then we got Johnny Depp cancelled as well for his performance of Tonto, which is deeply offensive. He wears like a bird on his head the whole time. Oh god, that is another depiction of an indigenous population that paints them to be, Yeah, okay, maybe there is a theme. Oh dear. Well, we'll come back to that maybe. Maybe one day we'll watch The Lone Ranger. But I'll tell you what else as well. I do like Rango. Rango's really good, and I remember really enjoying that film. So that'll probably come up on this podcast at some point. And they made that movie in a way no other animated film has ever been made, and I think it's really interesting. So we'll come back to that. Anyway, back to this film. So I think most of the issues come down to the script. So we talked about a lot of the stuff that I loved. I mean, very quickly, just to give a little more praise onto the moment that we sort of breezed over there. The entire sequence, while it isn't a big action set piece, the sequence of them rocking the boat round to come out of thingy is iconic. And it is brilliant to look at. And it is a really clever idea and such a brilliant visual. And it's extremely well shot. And the special effects are great. And there are lots of little funny moments in it, like the two pirate guys tying themselves upside down to the mast, thinking they've outsmarted it. That's quite fun. So I really enjoy that scene and that sequence. The only thing I don't care for is the ego trip sequence of Johnny Depp being like, I can act as several different characters in one scene. Oh, well, we'll do a dream thing then where Jack Sparrow has to deal with like 100 versions of himself. No, thank you. That was just pure ego. None of the jokes are funny. I'd have cut that scene straight out of this movie. I'd have cut any scene where Jack is talking to multiple Jacks out of this movie with pleasure. I would have done it gleefully. They're all bad.
Yeah, I didn't like any of that stuff. Well, leading on from that then, what did you think in general to the Jack to Jack's opening and Jack in the, well, we know what you thought of the very opening with all the Johnnies, but in general, the Jack of it all, what are your thoughts?
I liked it. I think mostly his character goes on a pretty consistent arc, and they kept him really consistent throughout this movie as well. Because once again, we have Jack with a goal. So if we're talking overall, I'll come back to the beginning and how he's introduced in a second, because that'll lead back around. But in terms of an overall thing, what I think is really clever about what they do with Jack in this movie is it really follows on from what we learned about Jack in the previous two movies, which is Jack will cheat, borrow, beg, steal, betray, whatever, as long as no one's, being hurt or dying as a result of his choices. As soon as there's a life on the line, Jack will do the right thing, generally speaking. And this movie, it turns out that most of his plan all along, and the reason he even really got himself too intrinsically sort of pulled into the world of Davy Jones, was to essentially steal Davy Jones's job because he wanted to be immortal, which is a deeply selfish thing, but very Jack, right? And while there are negatives to Davy Jones's version of being immortal, Jack feels that's better than dying, and it also backs into Jack ultimately still having a bit of a cowardly streak in him, right? Perfect. Works for his character, makes an absolute boatload of sense as a goal for him. And this movie plays that idea of like Jack maybe has had a big plan all along. And I do look, this movie does have one of my favorite lines from the entire trilogy in it, by the way, which is a great way to sum up Jack. It's when he escapes from one of the 79th times. And the guy says, do you think he had a plan, or does he just make it up as he goes along? It's fucking perfect. And earlier on, when you said the movie's not particularly funny, there were two moments I thought of that made me wonder if that was true or not. And one of them is, do you think he plans it all out, or does he make it up as he goes along? And the other one is at the end when the two British soldiers pretend to be pirates to not be murdered. And they're just like, Yarr!
Oh yeah, that was great. I mean, they've got a pretty complete arc, haven't they?
Yeah, they have. They have.
I did enjoy that.
So, but at the end of the movie, Jack is presented with the chance to get his goal. Will is injured, dying. Jack has the heart, or the heart is there for Jack to take. Will's in no position to do fucking anything, right? He's not long for this world. Jack can have his goal. It's right there. Immortality is in his hands if he wants it. And he gives it to Will to save his life. Which, while it isn't growth for Jack as a character, it's the same thing we've known about him as the audience for several movies. I think it's really nice that it's that consistent. And I also really think it's what you said in the first movie. A character like Jack can't ever really grow too much. You want the characters around him to be growing. You need Jack to be this consistent force of chaos for the people around him. And I think that's perfect. The only hindrance is the then choice to have him actually have had the map to the Fountain of Youth for presumably a period of time long enough to have had it at that point, because that lessens that choice slightly, because you sort of go, well, wait a minute, he gave that to Will because he knew he had a backup at that point. I would have preferred it if we'd made it clear he stole the map to the Fountain of Youth after saving Will, which is possible, but we don't know that definitively. The movie never lays that out.
Yeah, that's true.
But in terms of the earlier stuff, though, I love the stuff with him coming out of the Davy Jones's locker, like dragging the ship as a metaphor. That's amazing. You know, all the crabs pulling up, such a cool visual. The boat coming over the sand, it's amazing. And, you know, and them all coming to rescue him, and him finding out they're not even removing that scene of the priest. Within the context of just this movie, it is very funny to have everyone be like, actually, they've all got their own motives for wanting Jack back, and it's not because they like him.
Yes. Yeah. Do you think they did the turn of the decision of I wanna be immortal, you know, and the line that sort of covers that of after you die, you know, your perspective changes. Do you think that's enough to set up and make you believe his desire to be immortal, especially when, you know, there's a world where potentially you could just play moron if you wanted to. Davy Jones doesn't believe because he's alive the curse is lifted, and it's the same, you know, battle or need as before. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that? Do you think they did enough for you to believe that?
It's tricky, isn't it? I do wish it had been more embedded in the previous movies, because I like the idea that he's kind of always had something like that as a goal, you know. Whereas the line you just referenced is the line that kind of slightly works against that theory, makes it sound like a plan that he's kind of formulated since his weird little brush,
which I think is in there. Is that your memory as well? I'm pretty sure there's a line like that in there, or an exchange. I can't remember the exact.
Yeah. You might very well be right. I mean, it's a dialogue heavy movie, and it's 2 hours and 40 minutes. That line may very well be in there. I'm not disputing it. I'm just saying that does slightly, you know, that works against.
No, I didn't think you were. I was double checking that was your memory too.
Yeah. But that line is like, you know, it kind of makes it feel like it's more of a shifting plan since his brush with death, and maybe, but it still links into his character, to be fair, because most of his actions in the first movie are to save his own skin. And what's the ultimate form of saving your own skin? Immortality. So actually, maybe the idea of immortality only occurred to him now, but it still very much fits with his previous behaviour. So I think it's fine, because it just feels like an extension of what he's always done, which is try to save himself. And having his brush with the unpleasantness of being dead to a degree, you know, in Davy Jones's locker with the boat, has only exasperated his previous feelings of, I definitely don't want to be dead. So I don't know. Does that make sense to you? Do you think that's a sufficient?
No, it does, and I think that's fair, and I do think that, you know, I like that he has a motive. You know, once again, everyone has got their own sort of means, and it makes, you know, that choice at the end powerful. You know, when the heart gets stabbed, and you realise it's Jack doing it for Will.
Do you think that's they lay enough on that? Like, do you think it could have used more moments of Jack being tempted at first? You know, like looking at the heart. You sort of think, oh God, is he going to take it for himself, or is he going to give it to Will? You know, they don't really play on that, and it kind of does that. Or do you like it being subtle? I don't know. What do you think?
No, it's really difficult, because my memory is that there is a scene where he looks at the heart and sort of looks at Will.
Well, maybe there is.
I'd have to check whether. Yeah,
let me pull it up.
Yeah, I'd have to check whether that's correct. But it's really tricky, because this is one where it's hard to judge that, because I remembered and knew and what happened. So do you know what I mean? So it's sort of because watching it this time, I knew what was coming. I kind of, you know, maybe if there was that moment, or if it was every little look, if it was a small look, I took more from it because I knew what happened. Maybe, I don't know. I think arguably yes, they could have done that, but maybe if he's debating it back and forth more, it makes it slightly less heroic.
Oh no, they do. You're right. They do. They have a shot of Jack. Davy Jones is fighting someone. Jack's holding the heart, and he's got that half a sword, and he's just about to put it in. He looks up and he sees he sees Will and Elizabeth. And Elizabeth is like, you know, I don't know what she's saying because I've not got the subtitles on, but she's obviously saying, I don't know, don't you die on me, or some generic shit, while Bootstrap Bill is distracting Davy Jones, and then you do see the knife go into it, but you don't see who's wielding it. And the last thing you saw was Jack holding the knife in the heart. So they do play it a little bit. They don't. They don't. Okay, maybe I missed that shot. Maybe I
I think
blinked
more-
at the wrong moment.
More than that, I think jeopardizes the choice a little bit. So I think that's done right.
Yeah. Do you think the choice to do the Fountain of Youth thing hurts that at all? Like as I talked about a few minutes ago, did you feel that at all when you were watching it?
No, I just kind of went, oh, set up for another movie potentially. Cool. Like I didn't. But now that I think about it, I can see your point. But I have to be honest, I didn't feel it. I didn't think that intelligently about it in the moment. I don't think.
Yeah, so it's just because I'd obviously been, I'd gotten quite attached to this arc that I've sort of developed that's kind of subtle.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I agree with your feelings on it. I completely agree with you. When watching it, didn't take that.
It sort of brushed over you like as another scene in the film. Yeah, I feel like because
Well,
I was so pleased with that moment when
it
happened because I did not remember that it was a choice. I didn't remember that Jack. I remembered that was the outcome, that Will was replacement for Davy Jones, but I didn't remember how they got there. I just assumed it was Will doing a heroic thing. And I also,
in terms of
it was smart to have Will injured as well, because I feel like there's no way in hell, as Bootstrap points out halfway through the movie, that he would have given up Elizabeth for Bootstrap.
No, but I think they could have, even in the. I know the way. Well, first of all, can I just say, in terms of it going over my head, you've got to remember, Dan, at this point, I'm rewatching it knowing that we're, minutes away from that it's you don't skip leg day scene. So that's obviously.
No, I wasn't trying to say it was good. I rephrased as I was saying that. I didn't mean to say it was going over your head. I just meant it washed over you as just another scene.
No, I didn't take offense. No, I didn't take offense. I took an opportunity to.
No, but I don't feel like I don't think what I was referring to is correctly characterized by the phrase going over your head, because going over your head suggests you didn't understand the scene. You understood the scene. You just then didn't take it that extra step and connect and think about that scene in the context of the previous scenes. You just took it as it was in that moment, which is absolutely fine and a perfectly acceptable way to take in a movie. I didn't want to imply in any way that you misunderstood a scene. That's what, and I feel like going over someone's head means that, and that's not what I'm implying, which is why I changed my phrasing.
Yeah, no, it's all good. With something else we were talking about then. Set up.
Was it the Bootstrap?
Leg day, Bootstrap. Oh yeah, right. Like, I get that, and that's right, and that's good for Will's story, but she's also the fucking Pirate King at that moment. Do you know what I mean? Even if Will had said, "Look, you're Pirate King. You got to go and protect I'll protect the seas on the ocean floor, and I'll protect the seas at the bottom of the ocean and ferry the dead, and you protect the seas on the top of the ocean and fight for the living as Pirate King." Like, do you know what I mean? I just feel like the Pirate King arc is so good. Like, it's really embedded early. Her first scene is her as a child, desperate to know more about pirates. Yeah. The notion that girl became the Pirate King is a really full and complete arc across these three movies, and they forget about it. Like, and obviously it's amazing that they have a child, but I feel like that ending, it's sort of, is the. I don't know. I would have preferred it to be about Pirate King. I think.
Yeah, I think a more ideal ending is something you've gone with, which is I'll look after the souls once they've passed, and you try to take care of them and appreciate them before that time. Something like that, where she ends up sort of leading a fleet of pirates and keeping the world free, and that's her goal. Jack's off for his own selfish reasons. He's never going to think of the good, but the movie ends on the note of Elizabeth being like, "I've got work to do." The East India Trading Company is still out there. The British Navy is still out there, and they're still very much against us and our desire to be free of government control and to stick to our own code. So we've got a fight on our hands. Taking up arms at the head of a ship and being like, onward, that would have been a more powerful ending for me for her than tying her to a bloke. "Oh, I'll wait for you. Well, In 10
Yeah,
years. In
yeah.
10 years, I'll be here waiting for you because my life stopped once you went away. Which isn't necessarily what happens. They don't outright say that, but it is the implication that you're left with, especially when you add the end credit scene, which I assume you watched.
Yeah.
So, you know, for those who don't remember the end credit scene, it skips to 10 years later, and Elizabeth's on the shore with the son, who's presumably about sort of just over 9 years old, 9 and a bit years old now, and Will's coming back for the first time in 10 years since that moment. Now, there is nothing physically that says she wasn't off being Pirate King in those 10 years. Nothing at all, right? So maybe that's what happened, but it isn't what they're implying. I don't think. No. Because she's not dressed that way. She's not got a ship at her back. Do you know what I mean? Like, I feel like they could have done something there to give us both, even if they weren't going to commit to what we've talked about as an alternative, just giving her the dress of it, or maybe she's stepping off a ship at the beginning before she hits that rock to see Will. Do you know what I mean? Like, and you know she's like still on the seas, because I think when you've given her such a powerful arc of becoming her own woman, to tie her back to Will like that, no.
Well, they meet at sea. Like, she doesn't have to be on shore. She could literally be at sea, and his ship pops up, and she's got a fucking army there, and she's just got this ship, and she's captain, and like, it just would have been fucking brilliant. In general, do you agree with my assertion that sort of the build up to 8 different sections of pirates from around the world, and the pirates coming together to fight isn't the promise of that isn't delivered
correct
at the end?
Yeah, 100%. They just went, let's go big, and then they didn't know what to do with it, because the actual movie, they wanted to go smaller and character based at the end, you know, which is correct. You know, the moment with Jack where he stabs the heart we just talked about, all that stuff. Bootstrap stepping in to help save them, brilliant. The choice to have Will mortally wounded makes Davy Jones even more of a villain, but puts the pressure on Will to make that choice. But it's also devastating for Elizabeth. Like, all the character stuff is all coming together in that moment, and I'm here for it. But there was a big old fight scene prior to that I've, that's like 20, 30 minutes long, that could have absolutely made a boatload of use of, 8 fucking pirate warlords of the sea or whatever they are. You know, the pirate sort of leaders all being together. When after they blow up Beckett, you see shots of them all cheering, or maybe it's after they defeat Davy Jones. I can't remember which one, but after one of those two moments, you see every single pirate captain holding up their sword, go, yeah, after they've sort of won. But where were they during the fight? It's such a waste. It's such a strange choice. And, they make good use of them in the scene where they're all sat around debating who to make Pirate King, which is another one of those scenes in the movie that I'm just like, as much as this movie doesn't work as a whole, there are so many amazing things I do love in this movie, and one of them is this brilliant notion that no one's ever actually been elected Pirate King because no pirate will vote for anyone but themselves. That's so good.
I also loved it when Jack's like first mate or whatever he's called, they're talking about it, and he's like, whoever he's talking to is just like, so it's just like whatever you had lying around, and he was like, yes, but it's less effective, isn't it, if we referred to it as whatever old tat we had with us at the time.
Yeah. That's great. That seems so much fun.
Mackenzie Crook, because the characters have no name. I know we've said the names, but still,
they finally said his name in this movie. They say his name in that scene. It's the first scene they ever verbalize it. But yeah, go on.
Barbosa's piece of treasure being his eye was great as well. Like, that was very clever. And also the slight sort of re-engineering of maybe why Jack was so obsessed with his hat.
Right, because it's the little keyring thing hanging off the top of his head, right? It's that little round thing at the end.
Oh, was it not on the hat? Sorry, I must have not clocked that. Then I thought it was from the hat.
Yeah,
itself.
he's got like a gold chain that sits around his head on top of his bandana, and off that there's a small round gold piece. That was the bit then, because Barbosa cuts that off, and the monkey grabs it.
Right.
When they're on the beach, they do like a zoom in. They have Jack sort of fiddle with it when they're all handing over their pieces, which sets up that that's his. But he never hands it over. And then when they're on the beach having their parlay, with you know, that brilliant moment where the three line up against the three, and you see the
Yeah.
two sides, and there's a lot of swapping around, and you know, all that jazz. In that scene, Barbossa swings his sword at Jack, and very deliberately, but seemingly, I just caught that, you know, catches that thing, and that's how Barbossa has all the pieces he needs at the end. He doesn't have Jack's hat; he has that gold pit.
Yeah, and we need to talk about the Calypso of it all in a sec, but just to stick with Mackenzie Crook for a second. Another good example for me of, like, movie. You've got the pieces and stuff there. Like this whole, well, you need to say it like one lover saying it to another. It's kind of funny, Mackenzie Crook's character being able to do it. But haven't we got a couple that you want us to invest in by the end of the movie? Why don't you make Will look at Elizabeth and Will and Elizabeth say it to each other? And that's what makes it happen, because they are truly lovers. Like, come on, like why make a joke out of it almost and have it be like, because you need to do more with that, as we've already discussed. Like, Will and Elizabeth have barely any screen time together, and it's literally goes from like, we've got problems with each other to we're getting married. Like, so maybe that scene would have helped. So if you need that to happen for some reason, then have it be them. And I think there's examples throughout of that.
I thought that, and I 100% echo that thought. Yeah, I had the same issue with it. It's funny to a degree, but it's not so funny that it's worth losing such an easy opportunity to invest me more in Will and Elizabeth.
Yeah.
That's that. I agree, but this movie definitely has and again, this absolutely reeks of first draft problems. You know, stuff that will be punched up in the edit, so to speak. We talked about earlier, the jokes. You know, they are hit and miss. There are as many as we talked about. A couple of jokes that really did land and work well, but there's a bunch that don't. Like the little guy shoots the big gun, so he falls back. Lol, I guess. What? Do you know what I mean? Like, that's not brilliant. As I said, all the Jacks talking to each other, it's not great. Yeah.
No, never found any of the Jack on Jack stuff funny.
No. Yeah. So, yeah, I don't know. And also, I find Will... while we're on the subject of Will and Elizabeth, one thing that I forgot to mention earlier when we were talking about their relationship, Will's accusations at her about making choices for herself and not sort of involving him and being a couple, pretty fucking rich when he's secretly making deals behind her back, like, all the time in this movie. Yeah, anyway.
What Calypso? What did you think of the Calypso of it all?
Yeah, it's such a frustrating thing because it's like it feels like a good idea not fully realized. I mean, because at the end, what does it amount to? It amounts to a big whirlpool. It's a supernatural reason to have a big whirlpool, and they've turned a character that we met in the last movie over by revealing that she was in fact the lost love of Davy Jones, right? Which is a nice idea, and they have one really nice scene in this movie together. For those who don't remember, Tia Dalma, the sort of the oracle type character they met in the last movie. It turns out she is the lost love of Davy Jones, and she was trapped by the Pirate Council into a body because she was too powerful or whatever, because she's some sort of like sea spirit. And she discovers that it was, in this movie, it was Davy Jones that actually was the person that said the pirate, the pirate warlords, whatever they're called, the 8 pirate bosses, should trap her. It's all just a bit muddled, and it doesn't really feel like it has purpose. There's interesting ideas in there, but they never really come together. And again, I think that's just weakness in the script. I don't hate any of the premise. I love that it turns out that the character we met in the last movie actually had something else going on. And I even don't mind that ultimately she creates the physical threat of the big whirlpool, right? To create it. I don't mind her being part of that, but if you're going to do that, you've got to make it a bit more. I don't know, you've got to invest me more in her as a character and her relationship with Davy Jones, which I just didn't really invest in. Although, she's after vengeance, and I guess one of the last things that happens is he gets knocked into the whirlpool, and that's what stops it from happening. She's, like, satisfied that, that she's had her vengeance, so it stops. I guess that makes sense, physically, but it doesn't feel like a particularly satisfying character entry either, to be honest. I don't know. Did you feel differently about it, or is that how you kind of felt?
No, that's a pretty accurate summary of how I felt, and I just feel like, you know, what happens to her really after the whirlpool stuff, and I just,
I guess she's back to the sea. Like, she's just returned to original, but they put her in there in the first place. Why? What was the problem?
Maybe,
what made the pirates trap her in a human form to start with? What, was she doing something bad? We don't know.
But also, is she trapped in a human form? Because she turns into loads of crab creatures, you know, when she gets unleashed. But also, seemingly, you could read that the crab creatures and Jack at the beginning of she sent those to get him.
Yeah, that's a point. Well, yeah.
So is you know, does she just have an affinity with crabs? Could she turn herself into crabs then? I don't know. I don't.
She did
really
she did bring Barbossa back, so she must have still had some power, but maybe limited.
Yeah.
Maybe limited, and then, you know, once released, full on vengeance mode, woman scorned, all that jazz. But I just think as well, though, like for a franchise that did such a good job giving Elizabeth like an actual plot as a you know, a fucking interesting woman on screen. Christ, like Calypso Calypso very much fails the Bechdel test.
Yeah, for sure. It's I don't know. It's not handled great. It's very muddled, and it's real sort of Act 2, 3 typical pirates problems. That whole plot, isn't it?
Yeah, and I want to talk to you about that actually, because there's a huge section of this movie that's just everyone betraying everyone, and people have got secret plans within secret plans. I found that much significantly less interesting and harder to follow than in previous movies. And I think they were upping the complexity on purpose to some degree, because they were trying to, the whole thing of this movie feels like it's like we're increasing the scale. You look at that final fight and you go, right, they were going for big because it's the final, right? And they didn't really know how to make that 100% work or land. And I guess they've tried to do that as well with all the different complex betrayals and backstabbings that are happening. But I think a combination of that being more complicated than it needed to be and a very unclear script make that middle section of the movie almost unwatchable.
Yeah.
As much as I've complimented the opening sequence and its tone and the return of Jack and how they handled the ship going over and the final act and the choices made there, as much as the ideas aren't 100% as clear as they could be, you know, Jack giving that to Will, landing his character arc neatly for me, or not character arc, but his character for me, all that stuff, which I've, you know, given a thumbs up, and all the great scenes we talked about, all the scenes I really liked. None of them, if you'll notice, have come from the middle section of the movie. Or absolutely none of them. So how did you feel about that section?
Not that good.
That really bothered me, that did. Especially this time.
Yeah, I could definitely feel that way about it. And you just can't track it, and it kind of damages the relationships between all the characters. It damages the sacrifice at the end between Jack and Will. It damages Will and Elizabeth. Like, it's just too muddled. Oh, here's the Calypso. And again, like you say, all the big problems in this film kind of go back to the script. One, I'm not sure of, but do you think we should have seen more emphatically Elizabeth's dad get killed? Or do you think actually the surprise of it is quite nice and it's being hinted at with, you know, him signing orders and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think I like it the way it is. I wouldn't have included it. It would have been pointless, and I think it would have damaged the emotional impact of that, because Elizabeth's caught off guard by it, and so are we. And we also have that moment when she goes, "We must be back in the land of the living." And even for a second you go, oh, maybe. And then you go, no, that doesn't make any sense. And you realise as she realises. I think you're on that journey with her by that choice. If we see it happen, I think it hurts that scene. And I like that scene too much. So I understand the urge to see it, but I wouldn't put it in if it was me.
I think that's where I land on it as well. Fang thinking, I think his character's name is Fang, thinking that Elizabeth is Calypso. Like, it just feels slightly overcomplicated unnecessarily. What did you think of that?
Well, see, again, this is muddled maybe, even more so than overcomplicated, because there was a part of me that wondered if that's because she kind of is going to be. She is the Calypso to the new Davy Jones in Will.
Mm.
Is it someone essentially foreseeing that?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I couldn't tell if that's what they were implying or if it was just someone who was outright wrong. But what a weird choice to put that line in the fucking script. Because, again, as you said, it just muddles things. Again, another draft or two, and this would have been a really good film, I think. I think there's a lot of really good ideas in here, and just smooth out some of these ideas, clean them up, tidy up the middle part in terms of like all the betrayals and stuff, and you've genuinely got a really satisfying conclusion on your hands. Because some of the stuff we're talking about, they would have absolutely addressed in subsequent drafts for sure. Yeah, there's just no way, and you know, you can really tell because it just hadn't been properly trimmed down either and like consolidated yet. Because the final movie, when they'd finished editing it, was over 3 hours long.
That's insane. Of course it was.
And I think it was Disney that nudged them to chop 20-25 minutes out of it, 30 minutes out of it.
Speaking of good ideas within here, have we covered what you thought was a genius idea that you didn't realise was genius the first time and think is wasted on execution? You referenced at the beginning of the podcast there was something along those lines.
Yeah. I was very much talking about the Jack choice being in line with the with his choices, because I don't think I realised on my first viewings of these movies that Jack always looked out for himself until someone was about to die. Like, and watching these three back to back, because, you know, to me, it's just like, oh, the hero made a choice, right? And also, in a weird way, I guess the real button on that is Jack doing that for Will is, you could argue, the thing I said this movie is, which is Elizabeth being taught the lesson about Jack.
Yeah.
The movie doesn't make it explicit because of how it's executed, but her feelings on Jack clearly shift to positive by the end of this movie. And all they really needed to do was have a sincere version of her line from the last movie, where she says that Jack is a good man. I would have leapt out of my seat if they'd done that. But they did, and I do think it's kind of there. I still stand by it, whether intentional or not. My reading of the movies is the first movie is Will learning Jack's actually a good man deep down. The second movie is Jack learning that about himself and being surprised to discover it. But Elizabeth still being mistrustful, and then this third movie, because he gives Will that second lease of life, in the, you know, limited as it may be, Elizabeth finally sees Jack as ultimately a force for good, and I really wish they'd nailed it by having her say it or show it in some way more than they do. But yeah, it was specifically talking about Jack's choice then, because otherwise, when you watch this movie kind of in isolation or a year removed from the previous one, it's just Jack does the right thing. You don't really think about it too hard because the movie doesn't really labour that point. But when watching it in this context, I definitely felt that.
Yeah, that's fair. What other notes have you got?
Let's have a look, because I'm sure I've got some. Let's see. We talked about a lot of this stuff. Oh yeah, I was surprised to discover Jack Sparrow was a pirate lord, because he seems...
I was too. Yeah, that almost sort of took the mythicism out of his character a bit.
Yeah. I like the idea that he's just a bit of a scrappy, low-down pirate, and he's not one of the actual pirate lords. But actually, we have skipped one major point that's linked to that. So we learned two major things about Jack in this movie. One is that he is himself a pirate lord, one of the 8-9 pirate lords, whatever many there are. We meet Jack's dad in this movie.
Oh yeah, Keith Richards,
played by Keith Richards, which is for those unaware, is a big deal in the sense that Johnny Depp based his performance on Keith Richards' sort of mannerisms and performance, and so casting Keith Richards as Jack's dad's a great choice. How did you feel about it?
Look, it's a great choice. It feels, I can't help but feel it's a little bit too meta. When I watched it the first time and when I watched it this time, I was like, oh yeah, he based the performance on him. That makes sense. And I feel like he sort of is more than a cameo, but not doing, but still not really doing anything. He's great in it. Like, it's a lot of fun, but I don't know, in a movie that's 2 hours and 50 minutes long, I'm not sure how much I'd keep anything that's a lot of fun. Do you know what I mean? Give me the. I don't know. You could.
I don't know,
It's
one of
fun.
the big problems with this movie is how little fun it is, though. I don't know if I would lose any of the fun we already have. So
Yeah, but I
little
don't think.
fun.
I think it's fun for meta reasons. I don't think there's anything particularly entertaining in what he does. It is fun for meta reasons actually, because all of his best lines, like his line about living a life and all of that sort of stuff, I enjoyed, and the fun was he's like that's the character saying it, but also it could be Keith Richards saying it. So it's fun, but not. Do you know what I mean? That fun is pretty meta, and I don't think justifies it's not fun enough to justify its existence. I don't know. It's a really fun cameo. Maybe I'm sounding too grumpy about it, but you could cut it and it'd be fine.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you would absolutely be fine. It doesn't need to be in the movie at all. I enjoy it for what it is, and because it's so short as well, I don't really give it too much, because there are things I'm taking a knife to in this movie miles before I'm touching this. Does that make sense? Like, there are things in this movie that I'm snipping out. If we ordered the scenes in importance to least important, so we could figure out what needed to go because we were trimming it, this scene isn't in the chopping block, nowhere near. Compared to
fair.
many other scenes,
fair.
Because it's so short, you just sort of go like, well, you have your little fun. It's within another scene that works. It's fine. We just keep that. There's no reason to cut that. Yeah, but I feel you. Actually, I'll tell you a little moment that I made a note of that I completely forgot about, that I thought was really funny. The moment when everyone pulls guns on everyone, including the monkey pulling the gun on the parrot, and the parrot asking for parley.
Oh man, when that parrot asked for parley, I laughed my ass off.
So good.
I completely agree, and it's a joke that works better if you've seen all of them.
And in close succession as well. Agreed.
I got a question, right?
Yeah.
And speaking of random little bits, and
Yeah,
I
go.
assume if I'm right, it's covered in the Triv. But bearing in mind that then again, I have been to Disneyland, so I think maybe I must have been on a version of the ride. Dan, when they're going over the edge, is the film playing random audio from the ride?
Yes, that's in the Triv.
Okay. I just was watching it going, I mean, this feels like it feels like someone's, gone in with a dictaphone and taped it. And I have no particularly distinctive memories of the ride, but I was like, that feels like that's what this is it?
That's
so I'm pleased to hear I was right.
Yeah, I'm actually really impressed, because I did not pick up on that. 1 second while I can't for some reason recently I can't control F on my notes anymore, which is driving me crazy. I don't know why that's changed. 1 second, I'm going to bring it up on IMDb. Basically, I do have this trivia somewhere in my trivia, but I'm struggling to find it in amongst them. But we might as well cover it while we're here. Oh, here we go. So, at 32 minutes into the movie, when the screen goes black as the crew fall over the world's end, the ghostly music and voices heard are directly from the Disneyland ride. Most noticeable is Paul Frees' voice of the Skull and Crossbones that infamously warns passengers, "Dead men tell no tales." So yeah, it's directly that. So was it just literally the quality of the audio that gave you the hint?
It just sounded like it was a ride.
Hey, I've got to give you some non-sarcastic slow claps there, because I did not pick up on that, and I only found out when I read the Triv afterwards and was like, oh, that's neat. But yeah, well done for spotting that. I'm proud of you, buddy. That's a good one. That is some good observational skills.
No, thank you very much.
Wow. Other notes, very quickly, I just want to very briefly mention there's the moment where it's that if he's not with you and he's not with us moment in the sort of bathhouse. That's a great moment. I love that. There's like a guy there, and the we haven't talked about oh man, that's bad. We haven't talked about the new character introduced to this movie. I'm trying to find the character's name. He's in here somewhere. He's not in the movie a huge amount, but he's in it enough that I feel like we should be recognizing him. They threw his name on the poster. Where the fuck is the I want to get the character's name right. 1 second. Yeah, here you go. So it's Chow Yun-fat playing Captain Sao Fang. Yes, thank you. And Chow Yun-fat is literally on the poster. His name is on the poster as one of the stars of this movie, right? I just want to point out, right, that he does not get enough screen time for that. And I'm nothing against Chow Yun-fat, who is who's an excellent performer. But if you're gonna put the guy on the poster and make a fuss, this is the new character in this movie. You know, like we introduced Davy Jones last time. We've got this new sort of antagonist or whatever, and he is the most prominently featured of the new pirate warlords or whatever they're called. I'm sorry, but no. You can't. If you're going to do that, he needs to be in more of the movie. He has a reasonable presence in the first 20 minutes, 30 minutes. Then you don't see him for ages. Then he has a little bit of a presence for 5-10 minutes, and then I'm pretty sure you don't see him again. He's one of the people shouting at the end of the movie, or maybe he's even dead at that point. I can't. Oh yeah, he's dead at that point because that's how Elizabeth. Oh yeah, right. Because that's how Elizabeth becomes a pirate. She gets to his ship because he has a big death during that 10-minute sequence that he's involved in midway through the movie. I'd forgotten about that. I'm sorry, but with that amount of content, you can't promote that as the brand new character. And I get Chow Yun-fat, especially at the time, was like a big name to add to your movie, but you need to give him more screen time if you're going to get away with that, in my opinion.
Yeah, they were presumably, they wanted to, films tend to like to have new characters, so it was probably that as well.
Yeah. What a strange choice. I liked him, though. He was good. And like I said, in that scene where the guy is... so basically, Feng, which is that is what reminded me to talk about that, sees a guy, grabs him, puts a knife to his throat. I was like, if you... I'll kill this guy if you're not... And they're like, well, he's not with us. No, I'll kill this guy if you don't do what I say. He's not with us. And then it's like, well, if he's not with you, and he's not with us, and then you realise there's a third party involved. Brilliant idea. Great scene.
Yeah, it was done very well.
Liked that. I liked the little reference to the first movie and Jack being stuck in a cage. He uses leverage to get out. That's nice.
Yeah, agreed.
Because Will does that in the first movie. Bit on the nose, but Elizabeth looking after Will's heart. Fine, I guess. I know it's the thing they do with Davy Jones, but did Will have to have his in the exact same way, where his heart's in a box? Is that the deal with being a Davy Jones? I guess it is.
Yeah. Well, I assume so from what the movie tells us. I agree with you, but I did find it very atmospheric when the boat is like, I can't remember if it's sinking or falling in the thing, and they all start to crowd round him with their knives, and they're all chanting part of the ship.
Yes, you're right. It's a creepy moment.
Much to Elizabeth's protest, Jack swings her off with him. I did think that was very atmospheric. I did like that.
Right. Yeah, you're right. No, that part is cool, and I guess it kind of leans on the curse element of it. Yeah, fine. Yeah. Quick question for you then. On that note, Will, right? It feels to me like it should be Will's fight. This fight with Davy Jones, not Jack's fight. Jack's fight is, for his own... Well, I guess, Davy Jones was coming after him in the last movie specifically. But Jack's fight is kind of with himself, right? And about, like...
Nah, you're right. You're so right. Like, Will's whole plot is saving his father from Davy Jones. So I didn't think of it watching it, but you're absolutely right. That would have made more sense.
Yeah, and Will's the better swordsman of the two, to the point where, like, I think the writer or director, someone from the first movie had a quote where they said that basically Jack was the worst swordsman of the 3 or 4 main characters in the first movie. So Barbossa, Will, Jack, and whoever the fourth one was. They said Jack was the worst swordsman. So what as exciting as it is to see, 2 pirates, Jack in his very piratey outfit and his very, very iconic sort of outfit and silhouette, sword fighting with Davy Jones on the top of that mast. There's a part of me that thinks that should have been Will. And I know Will and Davy Jones do fight when Davy Jones gets to the deck, but at that point we're wrapping up. Strange.
Yeah, they wanted Jack to have a big fight. Do you know what I mean? They want Jack to have that moment.
But I do wonder in a rewrite if they'd have clocked that and gone, you know what, this feels better with Will.
Maybe, but Will does get his big return, doesn't he? I mean, Davy Jones is defeated by them, but yeah. Will returning with that crew and then them launching the attack on Beckett together is
it's a good moment. And I guess if Davy Jones, actually, I think I know why they chose to do it this way. It's not just because Jack versus Davy Jones is like a more iconic idea. Also, it allows them to do the wedding thing, actually, which we haven't really talked about. The sort of mid-fight wedding. Obviously, if Will was with was fighting Davy Jones at that point. You can't do that scene. So for those who don't remember, during a battle, they have a kind of funny idea, and it's not a bad idea. It's just not particularly interestingly executed. Where
it's not.
Barbossa
I
is
don't think
kind
it's
of
earned.
marrying them while they're in combat.
I think visually, it's fun, and it's fun, and it's quite, it's quite a nice moment as well. But it is not earned in this movie.
No, I would agree. I do really Go talk. We've not talked about that too much actually. So we hinted at it at the beginning, and we've not really broken that idea down. But yeah, this movie does kind of skip over. It seems like some sort of step in the middle with those two, where they go from being, from what I perceived as. Does this work? Do these two people actually love each other? Does this relationship function? They're so different to just, we love each other and we're getting married. So and I've said this so many times now, I'm so sorry, Chris, but I'm going to throw you under that bus again. Our resident love expert in terms of love stories in movies. How did you feel about that? Is there anything they could have done that would have fixed it? What did you need from the movie to sort of make that work?
I needed that mid scene. I needed more than. Oh, so I thought I loved him, didn't you? And that whole "it's my cross to bear" saying that to each other. I needed them acknowledging their love. I needed more scenes with the two of them happy. And like I say, we know my feelings on the end scene. And I think the actual marriage itself is executed in a really fun way. I just don't think they earn the believability given what they put them through in the last movie and the beginning of this movie, that they want us, it's not believable as this happy moment and climax for this couple. I needed a couple more scenes. I needed something like, the scene I described earlier with it needs to be like a lover saying it to another lover. Well, let's have Will and Elizabeth do that then. I needed scenes like that, personally.
Yeah, because I think you could have done it as it starts. So they Barbossa says the line, and Calypso doesn't react, and then Will, unrelated seemingly at first, grabs Elizabeth's hand, and talks about how no matter how different they are and become, blah blah blah, I still love you, whatever. And then he says the line at the end after having given that speech, or Elizabeth doing something similar, it doesn't matter which one, but that would have been better than what we got, because it does feel like the movie went out of its way to sort of set up a plot of they've got difficulties and differences as a couple after the events of the last two movies. They're a bit at odds, and never really resolves that other than just by saying it's resolved, which is not enough. So yeah, I agree, thoroughly agree. Last thing I got a note on. Did we like the idea of the reveal that Davy Jones isn't just some cursed former pirate, that he's actually got a job? His curse involves a day job he's ignoring, where he's supposed to be ferrying souls to the other side, but he isn't doing that job, which is what's caused the ship to become corrupted, his crew to become corrupted, him to become corrupted, all fishy and what have you. And then there's that brief moment when he's talking to Calypso where we get a glimpse of the man he used to be. Did you like that idea? Did you feel like that was a bit of retrospective reworking of the character, or did you think that fit nicely with what we already knew?
It's a bit convoluted, as is everything in this movie, and I think it was a bit too convoluted to work. But I don't mind the idea, and I'll tell you the problem with it. It feels like that subplot exists to give one of the characters a dramatic, tragic ending. The reason that happened to Davy Jones is so that it can happen to Will at the end. Right. And that's how it feels. So it's a fine idea. It's executed badly because, as we've said many a times, the script needs a rewrite.
Because the one thing you do on a rewrite of the script, we had to say this every now and then. When we do this thing where we sort of pitch maybe how we would have tackled it, you just got to understand where we're coming from. Our background is we studied screenwriting at uni. It's how we met. So Chris and I often, when we talk about things in script terms, it's the language we developed writing scripts together prior to ever doing a podcast. So apologies for people who think we're trying, that feel like this is an arrogant thing where we're saying, well, we would have done this better. Obviously, there's 1,000 things that happen to make a movie happen, and I'm not suggesting in any way, shape, or form if we'd been in the shoes, the movie would have turned out any better. We would have had the exact same time crunch these writers had, and probably way less talent, and we probably couldn't have even made it work as well as it does. So I'm not suggesting otherwise. We've got this brilliant benefit of hindsight and all that jazz to look at. We can look at the end of the movie and we can sort of talk about it. But I think the first thing you might do, coming to this script, is take out all of the lines where someone says, and there are like 6 of them, someone has to be the captain. Someone must replace Davy Jones, and then looks at the camera knowingly. It's like someone went, we should embed that, and then they went, I tell you what we'll do, we'll just do some really obvious embedding, and then when we go over the next draft, we'll smooth it out, make it a bit more subtle maybe. Won't have as many references, or we'll phrase it differently so it's not quite as obvious. The Flying Dutchman needs a captain, all that stuff. And you just, and I'm sure that if another draft had happened, they'd have figured that out themselves 100%, because it's just so on the nose. The entire movie, they're like, wouldn't it be tragic if someone was forced to servitude if Davy Jones was defeated? Yeah, yeah, it would, movie. I wonder who, because you never believe it's going to be Jag. I don't think for a minute. So you just assume Will, right, to save his dad.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
To be anything, if anything, like Jack's decision at the end, while like a really good character moment, is it to some degree it's inevitable. So I guess some of the surprise is gone. But yeah. So yeah, I don't know if you got any other thoughts or final thoughts on the film. That's where I've kind of landed. I think it's a poor script because of time constraints. Excuse me. I think there's a ton of really good ideas, and had they had another year or two, just to work on this, if they just done it as a separate production. And not force themselves to sort of do 2 back to back, they'd have had more time to smooth the script out, and I think it potentially would have been an absolute classic, and it would have really cemented the legacy of this trilogy. As it stands, for me, I think when people go, the Pirates sequels or the Pirates trilogy isn't great, but I like the first one, I think they're really marred by linking this one to the previous. I think the previous one suffers for this one, but stands on its own quite well.
I think that's a fair summary. I think it's bloated. I'll say it again, people. It's 2 hours and 50 minutes long, but
absurd. For an adventure movie, that's absurd.
It's too convoluted. There's a shift in tone which is effective but jars a little. But there are buried within that some beautiful scenes, and all of the problems can ultimately be traced back to the script and the way it feels rushed.
Yeah, and I think as well, like if you look at the in terms of length, look at the Indiana Jones movies and what they do with their length. They're an hour and 50 to 2 hours every movie. There's the longest Indiana Jones movie is 2 hours and 7 minutes. The shortest Pirates movie is 2 hours 23 minutes, and that's Curse of the Black Pearl. And when we reviewed it, we said you could easily snip about 20 minutes out of it, and I stand by that. I think 2 hours is on the button, is the length for a fun action adventure movie like this with this tone. And I think the Indiana Jones movies are actually the perfect comparison tonally to these.
Completely, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so it's a real shame. It's a real shame. It definitely falls down at the third part. Is it an absolute complete shit show? No, I don't think so. I think there is good to be found in it, but is it a good movie? No, sadly not. Sadly not.
No, it isn't. There you go. In that case, Dan,
let's trim it up. I'm gonna give you some trivia. So, this was the most expensive film ever made at the time.
Wow.
300 million. And if anyone's going, well, Dan, surely that means 150 million because this was a joint production. No. Total production across these two movies was 525 million. 225 million was spent on Dead Man's Chest. 300 million was spent on At World's End. Now, both movies made a boatload of money, so it's fine. The Dead Man's Chest made 1.06 billion, and this movie made just 100 million less than that. 961 million. That's a 661 million return. So
wow,
Disney
for that budget, that's crazy.
Disney happy. You know, they spent 300 million,
Yeah.
they got $1 billion. That's like me spending 300 quid and getting back $1,000.
Yeah,
Or
that's
just
crazy.
shy of $1,000. Disney weren't.
Wow.
There's a reason we've had more sequels. Do you know what I mean? Like it's a bit of a cash cow. People like these movies. It's worth noting that 300 million figure, because it was the most expensive movie at the time, that means this budget was higher than the entire budget of all 3 Lord of the Rings films combined, just for this one movie.
That's nuts. Because, like I say, the thing we've complimented this film on the most, arguably, is the visuals. But if you were to say to me which film had more money spent on it, Pirates of Lord of the Rings or Lord of the Rings, I'd guess Lord of the Rings any day.
Well, yeah, because it's not just that it's one Lord of the Rings movie, one Pirates movie. This exact 2.5-hour movie, more than all 3 Lord of the Rings movies.
I hate to be pedantic, Dan, but I can't help but feel it's one of the movie's biggest issues. So I'm going to correct you and say it again: 2 hours and 50 minutes, at most 2:40 if you take out the credits.
Yeah, it's the length. No, it's too long. It's way too long. It's way too long. So the events of the movie are obviously fictional, but there was a real-life East India trading company that did possess their own naval force. They also did participate in joint anti-piracy operations with the British Royal Navy. One in particular was the attack and capture of the pirate island stronghold in Giraya, I hope I'm pronouncing that right, in 1756, which was led by Rear Admiral Charles Watson, who I guess is the sort of real-life equivalent of Cutler in this movie. Is it Not Cutler? What's his name? Begins with C. Is it Cutler? What's the guy called? Oh, it is Cutler. Cutler Beckett. Perfect. I just weirdly remembered his first name instead of his surname, which is what we've called him in the entire of this podcast.
I think the movie calls him Beckett as well, doesn't it?
What's that, sorry?
The movie calls him Beckett as well.
Yeah, but I guess at some point his first name has gone into my brain, and when I was shifting for Beckett, I found Cutler and was like, "That's his name, Cutler." And then I was like, "Wait a minute, that can't be right. It doesn't sound right." And I looked it up, and it turns out sort of both. All right, fine, Cutler Beckett, great. But yeah, the real East India Trading Company naval officer uniforms are actually quite similar to what was in the movie. These ones are based off the 1961 uniform that officers would wear, with the sort of blue coats with the yellow sort of facings and waistcoats. So yeah, this is definitely intentional inspiration there. In pirate culture, Davy Jones's locker is sort of used as a phrase to describe the purgatory or sort of hell-like place you go when you die at sea. Which is why sort of in the movie it's kind of like depicted with the, this white color. It's like an in-between place where your spirit sort of sits, before the afterlife sort of decides where you're going to go. So it kind of is sat. It's kind of set in legitimate sort of pirate culture. That idea. So yeah. The film's running time.
I did like the way the movie. You could read the movie that the Kraken took Jack to a physical place, as opposed to. Do you know what I mean? It was definitely deaf and spiritual, and I quite liked that the movie could be read that way. I mean, don't get me wrong. There's elements that are categorically spiritual in all 3 movies. The first one has the skeletons of pirates fighting. But I just enjoyed that read. That if you wanted to read it that way, you kind of could.
Yeah, I think the only thing that slightly contradicts that is that the boat that was split sort of in half as it ate Jack is fully fully
No, that's true.
Together again in the sort of spirit world that Jack is found in.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair.
Yeah, and I get, and we've already essentially established in this series as well that reincarnation or being brought back from the dead is actually possible because they do the same with Barbossa. So yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, but I agree. I think you're right on the whole. Is that anyone who doesn't really like the idea that Jack was brought back from the dead can definitely read it as Jack's body was taken to that place, so he's not a spirit as such. He wasn't dead. He was just sort of taken there physically. So it was. I mentioned earlier that the movie was originally over 3 hours, and someone cut it back. The person in question, Jerry Bruckheimer. So yes, I mean, you should have done more, but I'll take 20 minutes,
Yeah.
30 minutes of it being
Yeah,
reduced. That's fine. That's
Have
still...
have those 20 minutes ever been released anywhere? Like,
Don't think so. I mean, I think there are some mild deleted scenes on the DVD I've got, but some we'll talk about in a minute. Actually, one of the trivia pieces has a description of 2 of the scenes, but there's never been like an extended cut released, if that makes sense. So I don't think all of that footage has ever made it out. I think just some of the key ones have. Let's see. We talked. Oh yeah. So apparently Keith Richards was a friend of Johnny Depp's. And they actually wanted him to appear in Dead Man's Chest, but scheduling conflicts with this tour, the Rolling Stones were touring that year, prevented it from happening. But apparently the day he came in to film his scenes, he was so drunk on set that Gore Verbinski had to literally prop him up. Richards apparently remarked, "If you wanted straight, then you've got the wrong man." Sure. This is a fun one. I love this idea. Go on, sorry.
I mean, in his defence, they literally hired Keith Richards to be Keith Richards, and he was Keith Richards.
Yeah, he did exactly what they hired him to do. 100% agree with that. Absolutely. Keira Knightley has stated that due to exhaustion, she actually fell asleep during the premiere of the Pirates of the Caribbean at World's End. The press tour was apparently absolutely brutal. So as a result, she's never seen the completed film. Since she doesn't watch her own films, she won't buy them on DVD or watch them again after the first screening. So she's never seen this movie and isn't likely to. I found that quite fun. The real-life Council of Pirates... there was a real-life Council of Pirates that existed at one time. The Brethren of the Coast was a loose coalition of pirates and buccaneers active in the 17th and 18th centuries in the Atlantic Ocean, Caribbean Sea, and Gulf of Mexico. They had a base on the island of Tortuga, off the coast of Haiti, and Port Royal in Jamaica. The Brethren were originally French Huguenots and British Protestants, but their ranks were joined by other adventurers of various nationalities, including Spaniards and Africans. I think that's kind of fun, but also I'm aware that real life pirates probably did a lot of like raping and pillaging, so I probably shouldn't say that was too much fun. Pop culture has made that seem like a lot of fun.
Yes,
but
I
I
could argue that about pirates in general.
Yeah, but I would argue reality maybe not quite so much. But well, yeah.
These movies, like in general, I was going to say this earlier, the pirates in general in these movies. Now, obviously, it's a family movie. They're not going to do fucking like rape and all that sort of shit. But in general, these movies, like the pirates aren't doing a lot of pirating. Do you know what I mean? They're not stealing from random civilians. They're stealing from each other. But they're not. Do you know what I mean? There's not a lot of pirates be pirates in these movies.
That's a really good point.
Them all.
Yeah, it's a really good point. Interesting.
Like, I just think that's interesting. Like, and understandable. Like I say, they're fundamentally, Disney movies, but it's interesting nonetheless.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. Prints of this movie were sent to theaters with the fake title of Rummy 3. I'm sorry. If Pirates of the Caribbean 3 is due out and a movie arrives called Rummy 3, I don't think it's going to be too hard for anyone to crack that code. So,
yeah,
absolutely
necessary.
Massive failure. So, when Will's ship disappears, there's a big green flash, right? Apparently, this is based on a real optical phenomenon that happens during a sunrise or a sunset at sea. It can be best observed, obviously, at sea, it says here, but it's caused by refraction of light in the atmosphere amplified by a mirage. So, that can really happen. I think that's fun.
There you go.
The character of Pirate Lord Mistress Ching is likely inspired by a real-life Chinese pirate, Cheng Ai Sao, who controlled the South China Sea with a large pirate fleet in the early 1800s. I'm not going to fully read this one out, but there's a piece of trivia where all the flags that appear in this movie, all the pirate flags, are based on real-life pirate flags. It's just a list of this person's flag was this person. It's just names. If you want to see it, go to the IMDb page for this film and hit the trivia. There's a piece all about it. The first film, this is the first film in the franchise where Captain Barbossa's name Hector is said. But it's worth noting that they didn't plan to do that. Basically, on the commentary for the DVD of Curse of the Black Pearl, Johnny Depp jokingly said Barbossa's first name was Hector, and this comment was misinterpreted by some fans as the character's actual name, and it became such a popular thing that the writers just thought, well, okay, his name is Hector then. So Johnny Depp's offhand dumb joke of just being like, oh, you mean Hector? Whatever it was he said, ended up becoming canon. I quite enjoy that.
That's good. I like that.
Yeah, me too. The scenes in Davy Jones's locker were shot in Utah. The monochromatic style was used to represent the antithesis from the usual color palette of the environment, of the pirate environment. I would say this movie does that anyway, because there's a lot of sort of like dark blues. It does look like. I did wonder if this has that same. It has that same almost like Deathly Hallows. Maybe not quite as bad as Half-Blood Prince, but that's sort of like very dark, lots of greys, greens. Like, yeah, not a great visual aesthetic, I think, in this film, color-wise, but sure. Chow Yun-fat apparently relished his role as Xiao Feng, and would often assist the crew in improving the set to help make his performance work better. I think that's fun. I'm glad he had a good time making the movie.
And great that he's assisting the crew and stuff. That's awesome.
Yeah, and I also think, like, in the light of like Zoe Saldana's less than favourable time on set, that makes me happy that at least someone was happy on this set. Hans Zimmer composed 8 new motifs, including a new love theme for the film's soundtrack. He scored scenes as the editors began work, so as to influence their choice of cutting to the music as preferred by Gore Verbinski. Music's great, as it has been in the last 2 movies. We didn't really talk about it because it's just the same as true. The music's always great in these movies, at least up to now. Just consider that still true from the previous podcast.
Nice.
Apparently the line spoken by Barbossa as they enter the Maelstrom is one of the lines spoken by the skull in the Disneyland ride before they go down the first drop. It be too late to alter course now, is the line. So there you go. I've got to get your thoughts on this one, Chris, because I think this is fascinating, because I'm not sure. Well, do we see attempts at this? I don't know. We'll see. So according to Gore Verbinski, Curse of the Black Pearl was character-driven, Dead Man's Chest was plot-driven, and then to bring it all together, his intention was for this third film to be both.
That's so. I just think that's weird. Like, surely you want to make a movie that's every movie. You want every movie to be both. You could, and I would make an argument whether it passes or fails. Is down to opinion. But all 3 of these movies are trying to do both.
Yeah, I would agree.
Do you? I don't know. Do you disagree? Yeah.
According to Greek myth, Calypso was indeed an ancient goddess of the sea, so that's where they borrowed that name from. That makes sense. There's an interesting thing that happens in this film with the sword that from the first movie that Will made for Commodore Norrington. It actually has a journey throughout the film. So Beckett returns it to Norrington at the start of the movie when he becomes admiral. Norrington stabs Davy Jones with it. And then Davy Jones removes it and then has it and uses it in the final battle. Jack Sparrow knocks it out of Davy Jones's hand and it hits the deck of the Dutchman, where it is then found by one of Beckett's soldiers. Then, while admiring it, this soldier is killed by Jones, who takes it back and then uses it to stab Will through the heart. So the sword that Will made in the first movie and gives to Norrington at the start of the film is the one used to kill Will in this third movie, if you follow its trajectory through the movie. I think that's a nice idea, and it's kind of subtle, which I appreciate. Seems like a lot of effort, though, for a detail that I'm not sure anyone really is going to pick up on.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Apparently, I think this is an interesting one as well. The sword is last seen in Will's chest as his father goes to remove his heart for the whole Dutchman chest thing. But it has been rumoured that when Will and the Dutchman return, the sword at Will's waist is indeed that sword, although it's not clear enough to actually confirm that in the film as it stands. Like, the shots of him don't reveal enough of it to verify it is exactly that sword. Okay, so these are the removed scenes, 2 that are talked about here at least. So Governor Swan learning the truth about Jones's heart and the cause of the original loss of the Black Pearl are revealed in these deleted scenes. Beckett and Norrington first board the Dutchman, that's where that comes up. Jones tells Governor Swan that Elizabeth is dead, as like a trick, so that he tries to stab the heart, and Jones mockingly tells him what will happen if he does. So yeah, he tries to upset the governor by saying that Elizabeth has died. The governor responds by trying to stab the heart, and Jones kind of mocks him about it. That's one of the scenes. The other one is an extended cut of the discussion between Beckett and Jack. It is revealed that Beckett had a deal with Jack years and years ago to steal some cargo. That cargo turned out to be slaves. Jack set them free, and Beckett is the one who then burned the P on his hand and branded him.
Oh, right.
So I
Jack does look at the P in the scene with Beckett in this movie, I think.
In the previous movie. In the last one.
Is that in Dead Man's Chase, is it?
I think it might be. Maybe I'm misremembering, and if I am, sorry, but I feel like that's the previous movie. Or at least it's the previous movie that has a line from Beckett where he talks about putting those brands on people or something like that. I'm sure they did that in Dead Man's Chest to some degree. But I like the idea because, once again, we are reaffirming Jack will steal, cheat, work with anyone, doesn't care if it benefits him. But as soon as human lives are at stake, he does the right thing. We're back to that. I actually kind of wish they left that scene in because it sounds like an interesting discussion. Obviously, lots of other stuff that should have been cut, but that's one I actually think maybe should have gone back into the feature. But there you go. A piece of 8 is a silver coin used as currency in 18th century Spain. In the film, the piece of 8 is a relic that identifies a captain as one of the 9 pirate lords of the Brethren Court. So, fine, sure. Let's see. At the end, back at Tortuga, when Jack figures out that Barbossa stole his ship and gets slapped by the 2 women, Scarlett and Giselle, if you look at Jack's waist, the shrunken head, the skull that was his mother, is tied around his belt. Nice detail.
Nice detail.
Not sure what I'm supposed to take from that, other than he got it back from his dad, I guess. Which, by the way, we should talk about that very briefly. That seems weird, right? That whole Howard's mum, and then he shows him the shrunken head, and then we just carry on like nothing weird happened. Very bizarre.
Yeah, very bizarre. I mean, the sparrows being the sparrows, I guess, but it still is weird.
Yeah, I thought that was strange. Anyway, the end of the film, many of the characters end up in exactly the position they were at the beginning of the first film. Jack is in a dinghy. Will and Elizabeth are no longer together physically. But Gibbs is sleeping on the ground. Barbossa is the captain of the Black Pearl. Pintel, Ragetti, and Jack the Monkey are back as part of the crew of the Black Pearl. So it all sort of comes back to exactly where we started. That's kind of a fun idea.
Yeah, I don't mind that.
They've done the timing thing again. At around 1 hour and 55 minutes, Chris. Prior to dissolving into a swarm of crabs, Calypso shouts a French incantation, which in the script reads, and they've written the French here, I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that. Would you like to know the translation of that text?
Tell me. Hit me.
Across all the waters, find the path to he who wrongfully entombed me. So that is Calypso looking for Davy Jones.
Certainly seems it.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, those crabs are either working for her or she becomes them or whatever, but that's the incantation. So there you go. We talked about this already, but there's an extra bit. So yeah, obviously the budget of all 3 Lord of the Rings films combined, it made 961 million in return, so it was 100 million less than Dead Man's Chest, which is still impressive. At the time of the release of this film, it was the 5th highest grossing film worldwide. The only films ahead of it were Titanic from 1997, Return of the King 2003, the original the second Pirates film, Dead Man's Chest, from the year before, and Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone from 2001.
I don't think it. I know we talked in the first episode about the cultural impact on specifically people our age, but I don't think it gets remembered in that way. I don't think just how much money these films made and just how big this was really gets talked about. It does not. Not on the same level as those other films.
I agree, and I think it's the legacy is damaged the same way the Matrix's legacy is damaged. Look at what happened with the Matrix movie they brought back last year. No one went and saw that thing, despite the fact that at one point the Matrix was like the biggest thing in pop culture. Do you know what I mean? Everyone was referencing it, talking about it. You know, it's the exact same effect. That's what bad sequels can do to a great movie.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah. So, final bit of trivia. Obviously, we're switching to our favourite segment. Boats exist. I was trying to do a seagull, but seagulls don't sound like that, do they? That was more of like an eagle or something.
Yeah,
like that.
I don't know what I was doing either. I think I was trying to do water against it, but yeah, that sounded equally bollocks.
Yeah. Well, trivia on boats. For those who don't know, sometimes the IMDb guys leave trivia about random things existing, cars usually. But when there's a movie that doesn't have cars, we look elsewhere. And this week, and on this trilogy, we've been doing boats exist. So the Endeavour, which is the ship that Cutler Beckett uses throughout the movie. The Endeavour was specifically built for the film and is a 200-foot warship with 3 masts, 15 sails, 102 cannons, and 160 pairs of glasses, which is exactly the number of glasses Daniel Radcliffe went through during the filming of the Harry Potter films. I got him again, everyone! I did it!
I'm not sure you got me, but okay.
I got him. It was likely named after the real HMS Endeavour, which is a British Navy research vessel commanded by explorer James Cook from 1768 to 1771. So there you go.
There we go.
Were you excited to hear about how many pairs of glasses Daniel Radcliffe went through during the Harry Potter films?
I was thrilled, Dan. Is that all the triv?
That is all the triv.
I'm not as excited as I am to know where we're going next week, Dan.
I've had some time to think about it. Chris. And I think I'm doing it. I think we're doing Stranger Tides.
Cool. I'm up for it. I am up for it.
My curiosity, I tell you what it was learning. Well, I say learning, remembering via doing my research on this, that one follows directly on from this movie with the plot for The Fountain of Youth. But it also is written by the guys who wrote this. But presumably they had some time to write it. And I'm curious to see what their writing, without Gore Verbinski's influence, ends up as.
Yeah. Okay. I'm excited to see it. I'm going in expecting it to be the worst, but we'll see what happens.
I have a feeling it's going to be okay compared to the one after it. I think the one after it's going to be the real slog. But these guys have written go on.
Even with, Bloom back and it linking a bit more to more of the characters we know.
Yeah, because I have a feeling that's going to be even worse. Like, I feel like if we're doing this, like having it separate, and a separate adventure that's not too tied to it, will probably be a little better. But I'm not sure.
Yeah,
we'll see.
fair enough.
We'll see. But these guys, though, looking at it, they wrote Small Soldiers, which is a movie we're definitely going to cover. It's actually really high on my list as a film we're going to get to at some point soon. In fact, I considered Small Soldiers for this series. The 1998 Godzilla movie, which I can't wait to tackle here. Mask of Zorro, Shrek. These guys wrote the original Shrek. Fucking hell, these guys wrote everything. Sorry, they wrote National Treasure, Book of Secrets. Like, yeah, this writing partnership that did these Pirates movies, very interesting. The only one of this franchise...
Did they do Dead Man Tells No Tale?
I was just about to get to that. Yeah,
no,
they didn't do the final fifth movie, so it's a different writer for that one. It's the only movie not written by these two guys. They did work on Lone Ranger, though, which isn't great as a, as a bit of thing to have on your CV. But yeah, they worked on. Oh wait a second. Oh no, they did get a credit on Salazar's Revenge / Dead Man Tell No Tales because it says here based on characters created by. So they got a credit even though they didn't write the movie.
Well, that makes sense.
So, yeah, that's what we're doing. I honestly, until today, Chris, I was really dead set on just not doing these two movies. I didn't really want to deal with them. The trauma of having to go through all the bad Harry Potter movies was hanging over my head. But
I'm excited. I think I would have done the same in your position.
Yeah. Once I realized this next movie is like a perfect example of like what could they have written with a bit of time. Will it be as incoherent, or will it be clearer and cleaner? But will it just be missing a little bit of that Gore Verbinski magic, or will it just be as good? And I'll be like, oh, maybe I've not got a newfound hard on for Gore Verbinski. Maybe I just like these movies better than I thought. Because different director.
No,
and actually,
I think you've definitely got a newfound hard on for Gordon Verbinski. But
yeah, I think so. But you know what's interesting is like looking at the movie as well. It's directed by what's his name? Robert something. Rob. 1 second, I'll find it. Rob Marshall. Rob Marshall is a fascinating director. One day someone needs to study this man's career. He's just been like a jobbing director for Disney his entire career, basically. So he did Chicago, big hit, right? And then he did Memoirs of a Geisha, big hit. But then since then Disney just give him a project to do every few years. He did On Stranger Tides, like as a jobbing director for them. They did Into the Woods. They did Mary Poppins Returns, and then he just did Little Mermaid. It's like they just pull him in when they want someone they can sort of, there's someone with almost no vision of his own, to the point where they're just like, you just do what we want you to do. Like, and I'm not saying he's a bad director. It's just really fascinating. You don't get as many of those in films, I feel. That happens a lot in TV. No. Directors whose job it is just to sort of be on set, work with the actors, not to rock the boat or do anything too unique with their particular episode, because it's all got to sort of fit together. So this is one of his movies. So we'll see.
Sweet. I'm in. Where can anyone find anywhere to listen to it right now if they wanted, Dan?
Well, if they're listening to this on Spotify or iTunes, they could absolutely hear that episode right this second by heading over to our Patreon for as little as $1 a month. I know, it's amazing, right? They can hear us talking about On Stranger Tides right now, because that releases Rewind Review episodes a week early, as well as episodes of our other podcast, Analyzing Avatar. And I mean,
what if they like it so much, Dan, that they want to email us and tell us all about their feelings on it?
Oh, well, that's also possible. mail@nothingbutstat.co.uk is the email address. I know, right? Breaks my brain every time. And if they want to add comments, Chris, there's another way they can do it, using a thing called YouTube. No. Have you heard of this?
No. I'm looking it up right now, Dan.
Yeah? Mate, you'll love it. I think you're going to love it. It's a new invention. So they go there, if they find the video in question of this podcast, they can leave a comment below on that. And of course, while on the Patreon, if they are lucky to support us via the Patreon, they also get bonus content, Chris. Bonus content.
I remember that's epic. I remember, I just want to make myself look like a right prick here. I remember once saying the sentence when YouTube was in its infancy, and not infancy, and not many people knew about it. I actually was that wanker, Dan. I remember vividly saying the sentence, I think there's two types of people in this world, people that know about YouTube and people that don't. What a tosser. What a young prick, arrogant twat.
I like that we've ended this episode by continuing your therapy session.
Yeah, no, but what a dick. I discovered, I don't know how... Well, here's a question, Dan. How did you... Not relevant to anything, but how did you discover YouTube? For me, it was through Nirvana live videos. Like, I was like, fucking hell, this is a huge resource for, like, Nirvana live content. And then it became apparent it was just a huge resource for anything you could think of. But
it's funny because I don't recall the moment. I just think I was being shared videos on that website, and then eventually I will have gone... Oh, it's that same website I watched that other video on, and sort of realizing it was just like a service for it. I think it would have been. I don't think it would have been an immediate like a moment of, oh, this is what this is. It probably more likely was a slow like, oh, I'm sure I watched another video on this same site the other day. What is this site? And then going to the homepage and realizing it was a place to upload everything, or anything. So I can only assume that's how that occurred.
Fair.
Yeah. Because I don't have any memory of specifically sort of discovering it, so to speak.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. What about, Dan, if they wanted to comment through social media? If we're not really using it, are we? I don't know. Anything there?
I mean, there's a Twitter @NothingButStatic without the G, but we don't really use it. So you can do that. I do have an alert set up for if someone does it. Should I check? Has anyone sent us anything? Let's see. Do I even have the app still? Fuck. I don't think... Do I have the app? This is going to be fun. This is good content.
Are you looking for the right icon?
No, I've deleted the app. Wait, didn't
Yeah,
I
well.
have an alternate one though? I don't think I used the official Twitter app originally. I think I used something else. I've replaced it.
Yeah,
It
it
with,
must have been because it wasn't.
I've replaced it with
wasn't
Threads.
that recent. It wasn't that recently, but I saw you posting something like 2 weeks ago. Or
So
something.
yeah,
it
so
wasn't
every now and then I will check Twitter and I will reply to stuff. I don't post anymore. I will occasionally reply to someone's thing. Like every couple of weeks, I might pop on. It's about as often as I look at it. If you look through those replies, that's as frequently as I look at it. And I think the gaps between those are getting bigger because I'm looking at it a lot
Oh
less.
yeah, I occasionally get notifications. That's sort of you're one of my like I interact with so little people on there that because I've interacted with you more than anyone probably it notifies me.
Yeah. So I put up a reply on the 8th of October, but then before that, 15th of September. And then before that, to be fair, there's one on the 14th of September as well, actually. So I obviously checked it a couple of times in a row. Maybe I got some replies to that, and that carried on. Then the 6th of September, then the 24th of August. So you can, 18th of August. You can see the gap widening. So I was checking it when I left Twitter, I kind of you could tell that I still habitually occasionally looked at it for a while, because I would still post a tweet every now and then. But actually no, 8th of July to 16th of August, there's nothing. It's a pretty big gap. So I just slowly drifted away from it. I'm just not really using it now. But occasionally I'll go on just see what other people are saying. Usually, I'll be honest with you, it's 9 times out of 10. I play a mobile game called Dokkan Battle, and a lot of the content creators that make YouTube videos around that game post very regularly on Twitter. They're very, very active on Twitter, and sometimes news about that game comes out on Twitter, and I'll comment about that. And I actually discovered a YouTuber we both watch, Mr. TARDIS, plays that game, and I had a bit of an interaction with him where I got really excited.
I think that's what I saw.
Yeah,
I think that's what I got the notifications on.
Because I kind of embarrassed myself slightly because I got really excited. It was like worlds colliding because Mr. TARDIS obviously is a Doctor Who YouTuber, and I loved the idea of oh man, there's all these YouTubers I watch that do Dokkan Battle content. He likes Dokkan Battle. There's some of them are British. I was like, oh, I would love to see you collab with those guys. And he was just like, why would I do that? And I was like, that's a really good point. Why would you do that? There's no reason for you to do that. I just got momentarily excited that two worlds were colliding.
Which I think was your response, if memory serves, to him.
Yeah, I think that's what I said. 100% what I said. So yeah. Anyway, I think we've covered all the stuff, have we? All the ways they can contact us and such. Who knows? We got distracted, as we always do. Oh well. Thanks everyone for listening. We really appreciate you. Obviously, the free ways to support us are to continue doing that or to tell a friend. So yeah, keep doing that. Otherwise, we'll see you in a week's time when we sit down to do the if people think World's End and Dead Man's Chest are the bad ones, let me tell you, oh boy, my memory is not enjoying On Stranger Tides at all. But time will tell. Maybe with a bit of hindsight, it'll be good. Or at least maybe it'll be better than World's End. I don't think that's out of the realms of possibility. But based on critical reception at the time, I've genuinely never seen Salazar's Revenge / Dead Men Tell No Tales. So I can only go by its reputation and assume it is fucking dreadful. But who knows? Who knows? So yeah, stick with us. I'm going to hand over to Chris because he ends this thing.
My name's Chris Billingham.
My name's Dan Doolan.
And this review has been rewound.